Chapter 828. The autumn sunshine of South Korea shone through the thick curtains into Jeong-hai's bedroom. Feeling the sunshine, Jeong-hai also opened his eyes in a daze. Compared to the jet lag of most people, Jeong-hai was fine. When he opened his eyes, he also saw the women lying in his arms on both sides. These two women were the ones who made up their minds last night. Looking at the makeup on their faces that was ruined by tears, Jeong-hai also let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that he did not control the power from the primitive world last night. These two girls should have been tormented quite badly. After stretching his neck, Jeong-hai slowly pulled his arms out from under their necks, then took his clothes and left the room. After closing the door of the room, Jeong-hai couldn't help but scratch his head with a headache. To be honest, Jeong-hai was not interested in them at first. In fact, until now, he still couldn't remember their names. Originally, this matter was very simple. Jeong-hai didn't care who took the money from South Korea. He was determined to take the money. This was also the price they had to pay for detaining his plane. But now, after last night's incident, Jeong-hai really couldn't say anything. After all, he was not the kind of person who was so heartless that he would turn his face away after doing something. Therefore, he was definitely going to lose this money. Although he didn't care much about the 30 million, he still felt some heartache when talking about it. "You're up." Watching Jeong-hai leave the room, Cheryl Lee, who had gotten up early, was sitting on the sofa in the living room at this time, watching a Korean drama. When she heard the sound of Jeong-hai opening the door, she also looked at Jeong-hai and said apologetically. She knew that because of her, Jeong-hai lost a lot yesterday. Although she had tried her best to make Jeong-hai happy last night, compared with real money, the bodies of the three women didn't seem to be worth it. "Oh, what are you looking at?" After rubbing his hair, Jeong-hai put on his clothes and sat next to Cheryl Lee. He was not in a hurry to wash up. He wanted to talk to her first. "I didn't see anything. I'm sorry about last night." Hearing Jeong-hai's words, Cheryl Lee decided to apologize to Jeong-hai. "It's okay, forget it. After all, I also got some benefits. If you really feel guilty, then take me out to play today." Looking at Cheryl Lee in front of him, Jeong-hai also said with a smile. Hearing Jeong-hai's words, Cheryl Lee was relieved. As long as Jeong-hai didn't blame her, that was the best. "I've already made the arrangements. We'll go to the South Gate first, then to Jingfu Palace, and then to Tsinghua Terrace. If there's still time, we'll go to Ming Cave. After dinner, we can go to Nanshan. It's very nice to take the cable car there at night. Then, I'll organize a party at Baoting. There are many beautiful women there," Cheryl Lee said immediately after hearing Jeong-hai's words. It could be seen that she really wanted to take Jeong-hai out to play. At this moment, the door to Azalina's room opened, and three people walked out. "We're going out to play in a while. Are you coming too?" Looking at the three people here, Jeong-hai asked them. "Let Azalina protect you. We won't go. After all, you're not that popular here. When you go out to play, try to be careful. Don't go to places with too many people." Azalina looked at Jeong-hai and said calmly. This was not because they were looking for excuses or because they were angry. It was because this was their working state. Jeong-hai knew very well that he was not that popular in South Korea. The pressure on the shoulders of these three people was still very heavy. "Okay, we'll do as you say. By the way, tell them in a while that we'll contact the people of South Korea to negotiate today. Also, if the two women in the room have any requests, try to satisfy them if it's not too troublesome." Jeong-hai was a person who always paid attention to an equivalent exchange. Although the two women accompanied him yesterday, because of the pressure from above, it was still not enough. But after all, something had happened between them, so Jeong-hai couldn't say much. However, it was not his character to completely ignore them. Although he didn't even know the names of the two women, it didn't prevent him from giving more instructions. "We got it." After hearing Jeong-hai's words, Azalina also said something. After that, Jeong-hai went to wash up. After washing up, he, Cheryl, and Azalina went to the hotel's breakfast restaurant to have breakfast, then borrowed a hotel car to leave the hotel and go out to play. As one of the most luxurious hotels in Seoul, the Shilla Hotel naturally had many luxury cars. But for Jeong-hai, those luxury cars were not necessary. So he just borrowed a modern jeans and left. The price of this car in China is more than 300,000 yuan. It's not very eye-catching on the streets of South Korea. Cheryl Lee drove the car, took Jung Hai and the others out of the hotel, and went to the place she booked. Less than half an hour after they left, the two women in the room also woke up. When they opened their eyes, they saw each other and saw the sadness, despair, and shame in each other's eyes. The two of them still had some memories due to the strange state of their bodies and the fragments of what happened last night. However, to them, these memories were nothing but humiliation. The atmosphere in the room was extremely oppressive for a moment. More than 10 minutes passed unknowingly. Kim Taeyin sat up first and then began to put on her clothes. Lin Yuner saw this scene and also put on her clothes. The two quietly put on their clothes. After everything was done, they opened the door and walked out. As soon as they walked out, they saw Hua Li fiddling with the computer in the distance. "Oh, you're awake." Seeing the two get up, Hua Li also smiled and said to them, "Oh, hello, where are they?" Seeing Hua Li ask them, the two immediately nodded. Although they were not used to it, she still wanted to ask. After all, they didn't accompany them for nothing last night. "Oh, they have already gone out, but you can rest assured. Jiang Zhou told us that the people in the team are already in contact with the higher-ups of South Korea." Hearing her words, Hua Li on the other side also said, "That's good." Hearing Hua Li's words, the two women breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Jiang Hai kept his word, their sacrifice was not in vain. Thinking of their family and career, losing some other things was also acceptable, although it may become a permanent pain in their hearts. You have to be more open-minded. In fact, Jiang Hai is still a very good person. He also specifically told us that if you have any requests or troubles, you can tell him and he will help you solve it. Here, this is his phone number. If there is anything, you can contact him anytime. Looking at the two in front of her, Hua Li also handed over 2 business cards and said with a smile. After receiving the business cards, the two really didn't know what to do. This night, was it just for this thing? Thinking of this, the two couldn't help but smile bitterly, but they still put away the business cards, then nodded, put on their shoes, and left the hotel. When they got into the elevator, the two women were a little numb. Jean Taeyin was okay. She was just very sad, but Lin Yuner was still a little numb because she didn't know how to face her lover. She felt very dirty now, but in order to save her job and her family, she had to do this. Looking at her grief-stricken face, Jean Taeyin sighed. She didn't know how to persuade her at this time. Things had already happened. The only thing they could do was to forget this as soon as possible. After all, Jiang Hai wouldn't stay here for long. As long as this matter was over, everything would be over. But there were many coincidences in the world. He wasn't someone you could just pass by if you wanted to. After learning that he had offended Jiang Hai yesterday, Li Shengji used all his connections and finally found out that Jiang Hai was staying at the Shilla Hotel. So he came here early this morning to wait for Jiang Hai, hoping to please Jiang Hai so that Jiang Hai wouldn't hate him. Unfortunately, he didn't come at the right time. Jiang Hai just left in the morning. When he wanted to ask Jiang Hai's floor in the lobby, the elevator just reached the first floor. When the two women saw Li Shengji in front of them, the two women were stunned. Li Shengji was also stunned. Early in the morning, his girlfriend's hair was a little messy, and her clothes weren't very neat. Li Shengji wasn't a child. Suddenly, he felt that he seemed to be a little green. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know about this, because after he ordered this matter, according to his thoughts, he shouldn't meet with the two women again. So he was still very happy in soul. Jiang Hai went to the scenic spots mentioned by Cheryl Lee. But to be honest, these things were just SOSO. The so-called South Gate was just a gate. What national treasure? There was really nothing to see. Jiangbakgung was more or less a building complex. He could take a look at it. Chongwadi wasn't allowed to enter, but it was the only place in Seoul where he could see the police. After looking around, Cheryl Lee took Jiang Hai and the others to eat a South Korean barbecue at noon. After eating the barbecue, they continued to stroll in the afternoon, but there weren't many places to visit. Chapter 829. Myeongdong was a landmark in South Korea in the eyes of many fans of Korean dramas. Because there were many Korean dramas that would be filmed here, the business street that was originally not very popular unknowingly became very popular. In Myeongdong, all the shops required waiters who could speak Chinese. These people were prepared for the Chinese tourists. It can be said that over the year, more than 80% of the transactions in Mingdong were from Chinese tourists. There were very few Southern Caucasians who would come here to buy things. Compared to the South Gate and East Gate, the sales here were much higher. But there was an important problem. Other than some super department stores, the so-called luxury goods sold here were actually more of South Korea's local brands. The most famous foreign brand was Zara. Zara was a Spanish brand. To be honest, the Spanish people did not earn as much as Huaxia people. In Europe, it was rare to find someone who could earn more than Huaxia. Of course, this was referring to the purchasing rate. There were not many young people who could earn more than 2,000 euros a month overseas. Of course, this was after tax. In China, there were not many young people who could earn more than 2,000 euros a month. After all, the starting salary in China was about 3,000 euros. So the big brands in Spain were just SOSO. That was why not many South Koreans came to Myeongdong. Most of them were foreign tourists. Jiang Hai and the others strolled around the place and then left. Even if they were women, it was very difficult for them to have the impulse to buy things here. After all, Jiang Hai's family lived in the United States. What they bought there was cheaper than here, and the quality was better than here. What was there to buy there? After walking around Myeongdong, they went to Nanshan. Nanshan Park in South Korea was a landmark building. The most famous building was Nanshan Pagoda. This place was also popular because of Korean dramas and the like. But Jiang Hai came over to take a look. To be honest, there was nothing fun about this old park. The whole tower was only 200 meters high. Compared to the 500 or 600-meter towers in China, there was a big difference. And the whole Nanshan Hill, it was more accurate to say that it was a hill. Jiang Hai came from my city in the plains, but in his view, Nanshan Hill was a hill, not to mention his friends from the south. But there were some die-hard fans who liked this place very much. When Jiang Hai and the others went to play, there were people taking selfies everywhere. If you want to take a selfie, then take a good selfie. After all, this place was also a scenic spot. If you want to do something about it, then do something about it. Jiang Hai could only laugh at this. After walking around Anshan Pagoda for a while, they went directly to the revolving Western restaurant on the 5th floor for dinner. Then, Jiang Hai and the rest drove directly to Bayou Ting. The so-called Bayou Ting did not refer to a hotel or a building. It referred to an area. The city of South Korea was divided into areas at the beginning. Below the area was a cave. They did not understand why it was divided into caves, but this was how it was divided. Bayou Ting Cave, compared to Myeongdong, was also a trendy distribution center. But compared to Myeongdong, which was mostly tourists, there were more local tourists in South Korea here. This was basically a place where the so-called elites and petty bourgeoisie gathered. In addition to the famous brands, there were many cafes, restaurants with specialties from different countries, beauty shops, and so on. At the same time, there were many South Korean companies here. It was normal to meet some celebrities here. But to be honest, it was not a big deal to meet a celebrity in South Korea, because there were really too many celebrities in South Korea. They relied on this to push up their economy. In addition to these things, of course, there were also some high-end nightclubs and high-end bars. This was because during the day, the main customers here were fashionable women in their 20s. Where there were women, there would naturally be men. Where there were men, there would be demand. So when it was nighttime, the nightclubs here were also quite chaotic. Jiang Hai said that he did not like to go to nightclubs because he did not like to be too noisy, but he was still somewhat interested in the place arranged by Cheryl Lee. After the car was parked, Jiang Hai and the rest walked into the nightclub that Cheryl Lee had arranged in advance. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai was shocked by the lively atmosphere. He had to admit that the people of South Korea really liked to go to nightclubs. Many of the dance songs were from South Korea. The musicians here also particularly liked to play electronic music and dance music. When Jiang Hai came, it was almost 10 o'clock in the evening. It was the time when people were having the most fun. Countless strangely dressed young men and women were doing their best to dance on the dance floor. Regardless of whether it was plastic surgery or not, Jiang Hai glanced around. The quality of the girls here was quite good. They had the face and the figure. When they danced, they might have been influenced by some girl groups, so their dance steps were quite asterisk cough, asterisk, asterisk cough, asterisk, asterisk cough, asterisk. Forcibly withdrawing his gaze, Jiang Hai followed the waiter to the second floor. The private room booked by Cheryl was on the second floor. The private room on the second floor facing the stage was the one she booked. After they sat down, a waiter came over and asked them what they wanted. Although Jiang Hai did not like this kind of environment, he was still quite interested in drinking. So he ordered 2 bottles of wine, a lot of beer, a fruit plate, snacks, and so on. Not long after, those things were served. Cheryl had been texting ever since she sat in the private room. Jiang Hai stood in front of the window, looking at the dancing crowd below. Although he would not go over and dance with them, it did not prevent Jiang Hai from looking. Just as Jiang Hai was fascinated by the scene, 3 women came in from outside. As soon as they entered the private room, they happily greeted Cheryl Lee. At the same time, they looked at Jiang Hai and Azalina with some caution. They gently nodded, then looked at Cheryl Lee with some doubts. At this time, Jiang Hai was also looking at them. He had to admit that the 3 girls who came in were quite good-looking. 2 of them were nearly 1.7 meters tall, and one of them was about 1.6 meters tall. They were all wearing tight one-step dresses, outlining their perfect figures, especially the tallest girl. Her indescribable place and waist were completely disproportionate, giving Jiang Hai a sense of déjà vu of the South Korean version of Wallace. Come and sit down first. Jiang Hai, come over too. Let me introduce you. This is Jiang Hai, a rich man from Huaxia in the United States. His wealth is far beyond your imagination. This is his bodyguard. Seeing that the 3 people seemed to be a little embarrassed, Cheryl Lee immediately pulled them over and introduced them with a smile. After hearing Cheryl Lee's words, the 3 people here were stunned for a moment, because Jiang Hai doesn't seem to be a rich man. After introducing Jiang Hai, she directly introduced the 3 people here, which were her so-called bureau. This girl in a tight suit is called Li Xiaobin, an online streamer and a model. This is Sun Yunju, also a model. This is Een Soen, an online streamer. I heard that she recently signed a contract with Huaxia's platform. Looking at Jiang Hai, Cheryl Lee also introduced the 3 people in front of her. Annyeonghaseyo, hello. After hearing Cheryl's words, Een Soen greeted Jiang Hai with her strange Mandarin. Jiang Hai also responded with a smile. Annyeonghaseyo, I'm really sorry. I was streaming just now, so I came late. Hearing Jiang Hai also speak, Li Xiaobin also said with a smile, but she spoke in English. She can also communicate with Jiang Hai if she can speak English. It doesn't matter, we just arrived. Do you want to drink anything? Wine or drinks? Looking at the 3 people in front of him, Jiang Hai also smiled. The beauties apologized, and they didn't come too late. Jiang Hai didn't care, but asked them. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the 3 beauties looked at each other. Then they couldn't help but laugh. Mr. Jiang, you don't come to this kind of place often, right? At this time, Sun Yunju, who was sitting in the middle, asked Jiang Hai. I don't come here often. I don't like noisy places. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai touched his nose a little awkwardly. He really didn't understand these things. Generally, boys don't ask girls if they want to drink when they come here. From this, it can be seen that Mr. Jiang is a good person. At this time, Een Soen also said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was even more at a loss. Am I labeled as a good person just like this? Let's drink beer. Come on, cheers. At this time, Cheryl also came over, opened a few bottles of beer, and stuffed them into the hands of these girls, then said with a smile. Hearing Cheryl's words, the girls here also raised the beer bottles in their hands. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai also smiled softly. If they want to drink, then drink. Anyway, it's not like he can't afford it. After several bottles touched together, everyone also took a big sip. Jiang Hai also tasted South Korea's beer for the first time. How should he put it? The taste was not very good, but it was barely drinkable. The beer that Jiang Hai and the others drank was called Height Hit. It was not cheap, but the taste was really ordinary. The alcohol content was a little high, and it was not strong. The bitter taste was very strong. No wonder in South Korea, soju was much better than beer. Chapter 830. What kind of business does Mr. Jiang do? After drinking a few mouthfuls of beer, these girls were more relaxed and began to wander around the room. Cheryl Lee also took them a play. At this time, Li Xiaobin, who had been paying attention to Jiang Hai just now, came over and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at this woman. Even if Jiang Hai had seen so many delicate flowers, this woman could be rated above 90 points in Jiang Hai's eyes. Whether it was because of makeup or plastic surgery, Jiang Hai didn't plan to spend a long time with her anyway. So objectively speaking, this woman was very good-looking. She had an oval face, slender and big eyes, 2 reclining silkworms, a tall nose, a small mouth, long hair dyed half-blonde, coupled with a slender neck and beautiful collarbones, and of course, the most important, 2 brutal forces. She was indeed a weapon that could harvest otakus on the internet. Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at her. Oh, I raise cattle in the United States. Jiang Hai quietly picked up the beer and took a sip. He wasn't the kind of person who couldn't take his eyes off something. Before he went berserk, his self-control was still very strong. Raise cattle? Does this make money? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Xiaobin was stunned for a moment, then asked with some doubts. In fact, just like ordinary people, if ordinary people say that they raise cattle, people may not think that they have much money. This Li Xiaobin was the same. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, she couldn't help but have some doubts. Oh, it's okay. Touching his nose, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Although he wouldn't hide his wealth, he wouldn't show off for no reason. This was not in line with his character. Moreover, even if he said that he raised cattle and fish and made billions of dollars a year, these people would have to believe it. Oh, I see. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Xiaobin smiled awkwardly and unconsciously moved back. To be honest, for women at their level, money was not the most important thing. For example, Yin Suin, who was next to him, had signed a contract with Huaxia's live streaming platform. It was said that just the signing fee alone was astronomical. In China, a first-class streamer could earn millions or even tens of millions of RMB a year. These people might not be the top streamers, but they definitely earn a lot. On average, each of the 3 people present had an annual income of nearly 10 million renminbi. According to the current exchange rate, 10 million renminbi was equivalent to 1.6 billion won. In South Korea, the top celebrities only earned this much in a year, and they still had to pay the management company. However, they only needed to pay some to their own team. Although this industry was purely based on youth, it could also be said that they were not short of money. The reason why they came here this time was mainly because of their relationship with Cheryl. Although they were not short of money, they lacked fame and connections. They knew a little about the relationship between Cheryl and Prawalton. In their opinion, the friend she wanted to introduce should also be a celebrity in the United States. If they could make friends with such a celebrity and have some in-depth exchanges, they would have some feelings in the future. If something happened to them in South Korea, it was very important to have someone who could protect them abroad. But now that Jiang Hai said that he was just a cattle farmer and had no ability, they couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. I'm going to the bathroom. After thinking for a while, Li Xiaobin smiled and said to Jiang Hai. After putting down the beer bottle, she went to the side and pulled Cheryl Lee, who was still looking for something to play, into the bathroom of the private room. After seeing her movements, the other 2 people also subconsciously followed her. As soon as she walked in, she locked the door and looked at Cheryl with an unhappy face. What's the matter? Looking at her gaze, Sun Yunju first looked at her in confusion, then asked her, "The big boss outside is a cattle farmer?" Hearing Sun Yunju's words, Li Xiaobin ignored her and continued to ask Cheryl. As soon as she heard what she said, Cheryl understood what she wanted to say and couldn't help but smile disdainfully. You're too anxious. And you guys, when you ask him later, don't leak anything. If you ask him, he will definitely say that he is a cattle farmer. But this is not wrong. He is indeed a cattle farmer. Hearing Li Xiaobin's question, Cheryl couldn't help but smile and said, hearing that the person they were going to accompany today was a cattle farmer, Yin Suin and Sun Yunju frowned. They didn't come here to accompany a farmer. But this guy is a cattle farmer. However, although this guy is a farmer, he's actually very rich. The cows he raises can be sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. He has tens of thousands of cows and can make several $1 billion a year just by selling cows. He also has a huge fishing farm. I've been to his seaside and heard that he can sell fish for several $1 billion a year. Recently, I've heard that he can also sell grass for several $1 billion. Seeing the three women frowning, Cheryl couldn't help but giggle and say. Hearing Cheryl's words, the three women looked at each other. They could clearly see a trace of distrust in each other's eyes. Since when could one earn so much from raising cows and fish? And it was calculated in hundreds of millions? Moreover, you should have heard about his relationship with the Walmart Group. He also has a close relationship with the Prince of Dubai. At the same time, he also has some connections with several tycoons in the United States. I heard that he's also a shareholder of Google. Alas, originally, I wanted to find a way out for you since we have a good relationship. But I didn't expect you to doubt me. Looking at the three women in front of her, Cheryl Lee chuckled and proudly raised her head. Seeing Cheryl Lee's appearance, the three women couldn't help but laugh. They didn't care about losing face in front of Cheryl. As long as they could get what they wanted, everything else didn't matter. After discussing in the bathroom, the four women left together. After returning to the private room, the three women were clearly more interested in Jiang Hai. Even Cheryl Lee was pushed to the side. Looking at the scene in front of her, Cheryl Lee didn't care. She was the one who invited the three women to accompany Jiang Hai. The more they drank, the more they drank. It was said that it was easy to do that after getting drunk. When a man wanted to do something with a woman, he would force her to drink. When a woman wanted to do something with a man, she would force them to drink. When a woman wanted to do something with a man, she would also force them to drink. Obviously, these women wanted to force Jiang Hai to drink. But unfortunately, even if it was a test of alcohol, it was impossible for them to force Jiang Hai to drink. When the alcohol that Jiang Hai ordered was almost finished, Jiang Hai's consciousness was still very clear. However, the three women seemed to have drunk too much. Of course, whether they were really drunk or not, Jiang Hai didn't know. But at this time, they were making noise about how hot it was. From time to time, they tore their clothes, revealing some things that couldn't be described. They also took the initiative to entangle Jiang Hai and whisper to him. Although Jiang Hai couldn't understand 9 out of 10 sentences, it didn't prevent him from understanding what these women meant. After being teased for so long, Jiang Hai felt that he was gradually losing his senses. It seemed that he would have to sleep late tonight. At this time, in a hall on the first floor, the atmosphere had reached its peak. After the live DJ played a few fireworks, several women ran out from the backstage. As soon as they saw these women, the people below became even crazier. Wow, this bar is very awesome. Today, they invited Hello Venus. Looking at the stage below, In-Suin said with a smile, but hearing her words, Jiang Hai had some doubts because he didn't know what this was. Hello Venus is the name of a group. They debuted in 2012 and have never been very popular. At first, they were suppressed by Xiaoshi and TRAR. Now, it is the era of AOA. They have never been popular, so they disbanded in 2014, but I heard that they are looking for opportunities to return to the stage recently. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled eyes, Sun Yunju also explained to Jiang Hai. Oh, that's it. Although he said this, to be honest, Jiang Hai really didn't know what the hell it was. At this time, the girls on the dance floor below had finished their opening remarks. The music sounded, and they were ready to dance. Wow, it's Wiggle, I can dance this. Hearing the music, Li Xiaobin couldn't help but jump up with a smile. She said to Jiang Hai with a happy face, then came to the middle of the private room. Tisk as if no one can dance. Come, let's dance together. After hearing her words, In-Suin and Sun Yunju also came over. After the three women looked at each other, they laughed. As the music sounded, the three of them bent down at the same time and delivered the indescribable thing that was perfectly wrapped in a one-step skirt to Jiang Hai. Ugh! Looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai was a little confused. What's going on? Fortunately, he quickly understood that these were dance moves. However, he had to admit that the dance steps of the Southern Galley were indeed terrifying. Every step was like the claws and teeth of a devil. If young people were to see this, they would definitely suffer from malnutrition. It seems that the compulsory military service of South Korea should be related to these women's groups. When they can't stand it anymore, they have to go to the army to recuperate for 2 years. Otherwise, no matter how many eggs you have, you will not be able to stand it. Chapter 831. I can't stand it anymore. Let's go back. Before the dance in front of him was finished, Jiang Hai already couldn't stand it anymore. So his eyes lit up, and he said to Cheryl Lee next to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee also rolled her eyes at Jiang Hai, then clapped her hands and gestured to the 3 girls. Then the 3 girls came over with a smile and began to pack their things. Jiang Hai naturally took advantage of them while they were packing their things. But instead of saying that Jiang Hai took advantage of them, it was better to say that they deliberately let Jiang Hai take advantage of them. After fooling around for about 10 minutes, they finished packing, but Jiang Hai's car certainly couldn't accommodate these 6 people. Although Jiang Hai didn't mind one of them sitting on him, the police would mind. So Jiang Hai thought for a while. He and Cheryl Lee took a taxi back. After all, he needed someone who could speak Korean to follow him. Azalina took them back to Jiang Hai's room in the Shilla Hotel first, because if they want to take a taxi, it would be troublesome to meet them on the street now. Therefore, Cheryl Lee specially called for a taxi so that they could wait downstairs. As for Azalina and the others, they left first. After about 5 minutes, Cheryl's phone rang. The taxi had arrived. Then the 2 walked downstairs and prepared to go out and take a taxi back. But just when Jiang Hai was about to walk to the exit, he suddenly found a woman at a bar table in the distance. She seemed to have drunk too much and was lying on the table. Beside her, there were many men who always inadvertently walked past her table. This South Korea is really messy. Looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled. He wasn't going to meddle in other people's business. At this moment, a person who looked like a gangster finally couldn't help it. He walked in front of the woman and prepared to take her away. This woman may still have some consciousness, so she resisted. This resistance caused the hair on her face to move to the side, revealing her face. When he saw her face, Jiang Hai froze for a moment because he was very familiar with this face. To be exact, just 5 minutes ago, this face was still in front of his eyes. Sun Yunju. Looking at this woman, Jiang Hai couldn't help but gawk. Didn't she just leave with Azalina? Did Azalina suddenly throw a tantrum, so she left her here? And the clothes she is wearing are not the same. What the hell is this? Just as Jiang Hai was puzzled, Cheryl Lee over there also saw this person. It's Sun Yunju. Jiang Hai, hurry up. You can't take her away. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was no longer puzzled. Cheryl Lee and Sun Yunju were also friends. She shouldn't be mistaken. So Jiang Hai took 2 steps forward and went directly to the person who was about to take her away again. Boy, what are you doing? This sentence was in English. After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he took a step forward and said to this person with a fierce face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this person was stunned for a moment, and then a hint of fear flashed in his eyes. He didn't know if it was because he had a guilty conscience, or because he was afraid of Jiang Hai's height, or because Jiang Hai spoke in English, which shocked him. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, this person said a string of Korean that Jiang Hai didn't understand, then slowly retreated. Let's go. After seeing Jiang Hai intimidating that person, Cheryl Lee also came over, stroked the woman, and said in her ear. Perhaps hearing a woman's voice, this woman who was 80% drunk no longer struggled, but directly fell on Cheryl Lee. Cheryl Lee was Prawalton's girlfriend. Jiang Hai's beef and fish were naturally enough to eat. Every time Prawalton came to slaughter a cow, Jiang Hai would give her a free cow for them to eat. Although a cow was more than 100,000 yuan, Jiang Hai wouldn't be stingy with these things. Therefore, although Cheryl Lee wasn't tall and had a slender figure, her strength wasn't small. Without Jiang Hai's help, she could carry the woman in front of her. Of course, Jiang Hai wouldn't let her carry her like this. So after Jiang Hai scared away that person, he took the initiative to take the woman and walked outside. Carrying her like a princess, Jiang Hai also looked at this woman carefully. The more he looked at Jiang Hai, the more he felt that something was wrong. Because although this woman looked very similar to Sun Yunju, she seemed to be a little older, and her figure wasn't so good. Most importantly, there was a mole on her nose. If it was normal, Jiang Hai might think about it. But now, before he could think about it, the taxi had already arrived. In order to avoid misunderstanding, Cheryl Lee carried the woman and sat in the back seat of the car, while Jiang Hai, who paid the fare, sat in the front. After saying that it was the Shilla Hotel, Jiang Hai didn't think about it anymore. Instead, he focused on looking at the night view of Seoul. It was now around 11 o'clock in the evening. There weren't many cars in Seoul, so the car drove very fast. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the Shilla Hotel. After paying the fare, Jiang Hai carried the completely drunk Sun Yunju and Cheryl Lee out of the car and walked into the hotel. After taking the elevator to his floor, Jiang Hai went straight into his room. Walking into the room, Jiang Hai found that Azalina was sitting in the living room watching TV at this time. Seeing Jiang Hai carrying a woman back, she was stunned for a moment. Then, she shook her head indifferently. She was just a little surprised. It didn't matter to her how many women Jiang Hai had. Where are they? Looking at Azalina's gaze, Jiang Hai, who originally had some doubts about whether this woman was Sun Yunju, was relieved because he misunderstood the meaning of Azalina's gaze. Azalina was just a little surprised, but he thought that Azalina's gaze was, "How can you still find her?" Now that she saw Jiang Hai carrying her back, she didn't care. God knows what this woman did to her just now. She's in the room. Be gentle. You still have work tomorrow. Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina said to him, Work? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. Work? Well, didn't you say that you wanted the team to contact the South Korea government today? We've already contacted them today. The beef will be flown to Huaxia tonight, and the compensation is only $10 million. The South Korea government agreed very quickly, but they have another request. They will tell you tomorrow. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai nodded a little woodenly. It seemed that he couldn't stay out too late today. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai and Cheryl Lee walked into Jiang Hai's room together with Sun Yunju. Clang, clang. However, just as they walked in, Jiang Hai saw three figures suddenly jump out from a distance. Of course, their jump did not scare Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai was looking at the clothes of the three people in front of him and scrupulously. After the three of them came back, they deliberately took a shower first, and then changed into very light pajamas. Rather than pajamas, it was more like a pair of, it was fine as long as everyone understood it. Their attire was visible at a glance, and there was a hint of sexiness to it. It made Jiang Hai's fingers itch instantly. Just as he was about to pounce on them, he realized that something was wrong. Sun Yunju, who he saw just now, was standing in front of him. If Sun Yunju was here, then what about the one in his arms? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at the one in his arms, and the others also looked at this person. They originally thought that with the three of them tonight, Jiang Hai was already a little too much, but they didn't expect Jiang Hai to bring another one back. What the hell is this? Just now, this sister drank too much in the bar and was about to be bullied by some hooligans. I thought it was Yunju. It seems that I misunderstood. Looking at Sun Yunju in front of her, Cheryl Lee smiled a little awkwardly. What should we do now? Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai asked in a daze. This is awkward. Call the police. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Insuin thought for a moment and said to Jiang Hai first, No, we didn't call the police just now. If we call the police now, we won't be able to explain it clearly. And if it is exposed. But as soon as she mentioned this matter, Li Xiaobin and Sun Yunju next to her immediately rejected it. They're also considered public figures with a reputation. If they call the police, and the reporters came and found that the three of them were accompanying a rich businessman late at night, then their future will be ruined. And they don't have the confidence to catch Jiang Hai. As soon as this idea was mentioned, it was rejected. Then what should we do? Looking at the four people in front of him, Jiang Hai was also a little helpless. What is this? What's there to be conflicted about? It's the same as chasing a sheep. I know how powerful you are. Then let her join us. Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Cheryl Lee also took the initiative to come over and said with a smile, "Is this something I should take the initiative to do?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little dumbfounded. She must have mistaken the priority. She drank so much in the bar. She must be prepared to be picked up. Instead of letting those hooligans take advantage of her, it's better to let you take advantage of her. But we have to check first. I know you don't want to wear a raincoat. Don't get infected with any diseases. That will be troublesome. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl also said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was still somewhat hesitant. Looking at his appearance, Cheryl Lee signaled to the others with her eyes. Then In Suin and the others swarmed over. It would be impossible for them to rest early tonight. Chapter 832. This body is so dirty. Back to the morning when Jiang Hai and the others went out to play. When Lin Yuner and Jean Taiyin, who had experienced something last night, went downstairs, they happened to meet Lin Yuner's boyfriend, Li Shengji. When he saw his girlfriend coming down from the elevator in the morning with her clothes in a mess and no makeup, he was stunned. When Lin Yuner saw him, she was even more stunned. The most embarrassing thing in the world might be something like this. It was too cruel, too NTR. But unfortunately, it was not Jiang Hai who was being tortured. Even if Jiang Hai knew, he would at most say that it was too embarrassing. He was originally a good person. Fortunately, Jean Taiyin reacted quickly. She immediately pulled Lin Yuner and got into the car. They drove yesterday and quickly left. After Lin Yuner left, Li Shengji seemed to have gone crazy and kept calling her. He drove out to look for traces of them, but unfortunately, there was nothing. Lin Yuner could not face this man at this time. She also guessed that he might go to her home to look for her, so she did not go home. Instead, she went to Jean Taiyin's house. When she got home, the first thing she did was to take a shower. But after rubbing many times, she still felt very dirty. Not physically, but spiritually. She wiped the steamy mirror and looked at her body in the mirror that was already red from rubbing. Big drops of tears flowed down her red and swollen doe eyes. Probably because she heard the sound of the bathroom, Jean Taiyin also walked over and leaned against the door. She did not know what to do now. Last night, Yuner was not the only one who had a nightmare. She also had a nightmare. But now, she had to comfort this injured girl. But what should she say? What should she do? She also needed someone to comfort her. What should she do? Han Jiaran was born in Seoul, South Korea, in 1982. She was considered a top student and graduated from Tsinghua University. In 2002, she entered the entertainment industry through a commercial. Then, she starred in Yellow Handkerchief. Once the TV series was broadcast, it could be said that she became popular. In the idol circle of South Korea, the most popular were not the more famous ones in Hwaseong, such as Song Huichiao and Kwon Ji-shin. The most popular was naturally the #1 beauty of South Korea, Kim Tae-hee, while Han Jiaran and Sun Ijin coexisted behind her. It could be said that they were all part of the top group of female celebrities in South Korea. As for Han Jiaran, she could be said to be one of the representatives at the peak of her career. In 2005, she married another actor, Yin Jung-shuan. He retired in 2007, probably due to financial reasons. He came back in 10 years, and after that, he became popular again. However, not long after she became popular, she retired again because of her pregnancy. It was the same this time. It had been a long time since she appeared in the public eye because she gave birth to her baby this year. Originally, this was a very enviable family in the entertainment industry, but things were never as perfect as outsiders imagined. The woman was pregnant for more than 9 months. When a man went out to work, he could always come into contact with those young and beautiful girls who wanted to climb up the social ladder. Naturally, her husband slowly went astray. She just found out about this today. After a big fight with her husband, who had just returned from a business meeting, she went to the bar to drink alone. However, she didn't expect that she would drink too much. She couldn't remember what happened next. She only vaguely remembered that she was taken away by a woman. Then, she vaguely remembered that she seemed to have entered a room where several women took off her clothes. Afterwards, she had a dream. It was a dream about something, a dream that couldn't be described. It wasn't until she woke up the next day and found herself lying naked in a room that she finally realized what had happened to her the night before. Ah! She held on to her hair and screamed loudly. She couldn't believe that she had spent the night outside like this. And a few hours ago, she was still yelling at her husband for being unfaithful. But now, what right did she have to scold him? The relationship between men and women was unequal to begin with. This was even more so in South Korea. If a man got into an accident, a woman was likely to forgive him. But if a woman got into an accident, not only would the man not forgive her, but the whole world would criticize her. Thinking of this, Koreana couldn't help but feel a lump in her throat. Tears began to fall from her eyes. What happened? At this time, the door of the room opened, and Jiang Hai walked in with a puzzled look on his face. But when he saw Han Jiaoren sitting there crying, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he smiled a little awkwardly. "Oh, you're awake." Looking at this woman, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say. He could only respond with a smile. You beast, you're worse than a pig or a dog." Looking at Jiang Hai, Koreana seemed to have found a breakthrough. She began to yell at him loudly. But unfortunately, it was like casting pearls before swine. Jiang Hai didn't understand at all. "I'm sorry, I don't speak Korean, so I don't understand what you're saying. I still have things to do now. If you think of a solution, you can wait for me. You can use this room as you wish." Until she was tired of scolding, Jiang Hai scratched his head and said something that almost made her faint. Then he smiled apologetically and left. Looking at Jiang Hai's back as he left, Koreana threw the pillow next to her with all her strength. It hit the door heavily, and then she began to scream. But after screaming for a long time, she gradually calmed down. Since things had already happened, it was meaningless to think about it now. Now, she had to think about how to solve this matter. From this, it could be seen that Han Jia's ability to take a blow was much stronger than Lin Yun-er. Lin Yun-er was trying to save her career and her family. In the end, she ended up having sex with Jiang Hai. It could be said that one was willing to fight while the other was willing to obstruct. In the end, they both collapsed. But this woman quickly calmed down and began to think of a way. Her mind turned. The first thing she thought of was that this matter couldn't be publicized. She couldn't let others know. She couldn't call the police. Judging from what Jiang Hai said just now, although he had an Asian face, he should be a foreigner. If this matter was exposed, then she would be ruined. And this guy just patted his butt and went abroad. She still couldn't do anything. Secondly, she had to hide this matter from her husband. She was now in no mood to pursue her husband's affairs outside. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but feel sad. She was really a coward. She was raped, but the result was that she couldn't publicize it. She even had to reconcile with the person who raped her and ask him to help her hide this matter. Shame. Although she felt humiliated from the inside out, she still stood up and put on her clothes. She wanted to find the man just now and explain things to him. However, when she opened the door, she only found two women in the living room. These two women, one a foreigner and one an Asian, were sitting there watching TV. When they heard the door open, the two of them also looked over. After seeing that it was Koreana, they smiled kindly. Looking at the situation outside, Koreana couldn't help but feel a little confused. She didn't know what to say. "Hello, what's the matter? Are you not feeling well?" Looking at her, Shirley stood up and asked with some doubts. The police station was open until very late last night, but early this morning, In Soon, Li Xiaobin, and Sun Yunju all left. After she got up, she also watched TV here. Last night, it was said that Jiang Hai would have a meeting with the senior management of South Korea today. So just now, Azalina and Galina left with Jiang Hai, leaving only Wallace Shelley here. The two of them were watching TV together. At this time, Koreana appeared, which also startled them. "No, nothing, cough. There's something. Where is that man?" Although it was a bit difficult to say this, Koreana gritted her teeth. For her family, for her career, for her everything, she must reach an agreement with that man. "Man? Oh, Jiang Hai. He went to a meeting. Are you looking for him for something?" Looking at Koreana in front of her, Cheryl Lee asked with some doubts. Looking at her gnashing her teeth, it was better to pretend that she didn't know anything now. If this woman knew that he was the one who asked Jiang Hai to bring her back yesterday, she would probably find trouble with him. Yes, if it's convenient. Can you give me his phone number? Taking a deep breath, Coriana forcibly suppressed the anger in her heart and asked Cheryl Lee in front of her. Hearing her words, Cheryl Lee shrugged and gave her Jiang Hai's phone number. After getting Jiang Hai's phone number, she nodded gently. After thinking for a while, she went into the bathroom first. After tidying up and making sure that there was no problem, she went downstairs. Of course, she still had to be careful when going downstairs. After all, there were a lot of paparazzi here. She quietly went downstairs and got into a taxi. Then, she called the number that Cheryl Lee had given her. Chapter 833. Sitting in an extended Rolls-Royce, a person sent by Zheng Jin sat in front of Jiang Hai and said with a serious face, "Boss, this time, the South Korea side wants to see you. Their intention is very clear. They want to get the formula for the mutation of the forage from your hands, or they want to cooperate with you." This person was the person in charge of the negotiation team. Gao Peng had to admit that Zheng Jin was a talent. She had a good eye for people. The person in charge of the negotiation team in front of him was called Toulouse Parkville. He was a European of Greek descent. However, he had lived in the United States since he was young. He was already 35 years old this year. 10 years ago, he graduated from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In the beginning, he was high-spirited. He went to New York to make a living as a trader, a salesman, and a worker. He had his glory and his downfall. After Jiang Hai established the Tunglong Company last year, Zheng Jin felt that he was a good person after some introductions. Thus, she accepted him into the company. It turned out that Toulouse Parkville was not suitable for starting his own business. However, it was not bad for him to work for someone else. He started as a salesman and became a sales supervisor within 3 months. Half a year later, he was promoted to the position of deputy manager of the sales department. Moreover, his ability had already surpassed that of a manager. His negotiation skills and ability to read people's minds were quite good. Most importantly, his 10 years of experience in society had smoothed out his edges and corners. He was now very willing to stay in the Tunglong Company. Of course, the salary that Jiang Hai gave him was also the basis for his agreement. Jiang Hai's company was not listed, so his shares were 100%. However, he gave out a 10% dividend to those who performed well. In addition to her annual salary of $1 million, Zheng Jin also received a 5% dividend. Although this was the first year, there was not much profit. After all, the Tunglong Company transported most of Jiang Hai's beef. However, the annual net profit was more than $50 million. She received a 5% dividend, which was $5 million. Together with her salary, it was $5 million. Such an annual salary was very scary for a new company. After all, the annual salary that the Walmart Group gave Prawalton was only $3 million. Of course, this was also because she was only in charge of one department. Toulouse Parkville's annual salary was $300,000. However, Zheng Jin gave him a 1% dividend, which meant that he could earn $800,000 this year. This was for a person who was unemployed a year ago. This was an astronomical figure. He knew very well that he was now tied to Jiang Hai's chariot. As long as he does his job well, his income will increase in the future. Otherwise, Zheng Jin wouldn't have sent him as the head of the negotiation team. And this time, he didn't come here in vain. Jiang Hai had already made an agreement with him before he came. They could get 10% of the negotiated amount, which was the compensation amount. Therefore, they were all holding back at the beginning. They wanted the $100 million compensation. That 10% was $10 million, divided among the 6 of them. And even if Moses Adams' share was included, each of them would get more than $1 million. However, Jiang Hai was in the lead and fell in love with his woman. Therefore, the $100 million became $10 million. However, $10 million was not bad. Each of them would get more than $1 million. As for why the South Koreans invited Jiang Hai to Kingwood, he could more or less guess it. I feel the same way. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai chuckled. As soon as the South Koreans raised their butts, Jiang Hai knew that they were going to shit a few sheep dung eggs. These people were famous for their shamelessness. Boss, these are the plans we made for you. You could take a look. Hearing that Jiang Hai was mentally prepared, Tulumen smiled and took out a stack of papers from his briefcase. He handed it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai took it and looked at it briefly. To be honest, Jiang Hai hated looking at things. However, now that it was related to business, he had to look at it even if he did not want to. After glancing at the things on the paper, Jiang Hai really thought highly of Tulumen. On this stack of papers, almost all the things that the South Koreans might ask Jiang Hai about were listed. If Jiang Hai was interested, he could take note of it. According to the things written on it, it was enough to deal with the South Koreans without leaving any loopholes. However, Jiang Hai smiled and returned the stack of papers to Tulumen in front of him. A boss? Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Tulumen was a little confused. Was Jiang Hai not satisfied with these things? No, I'm quite satisfied with these things, but you've got one thing wrong. That's the problem between me and the South Koreans. Our pasture is unique in the world, and it's absolutely impossible for others to copy it. Therefore, the things you wrote about dealing with a country are more about me at the bottom, while the South Koreans are at the top. Looking at Tulumen in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. To be honest, if he was just an ordinary person, then this document would be excellent. If his pasture could be deciphered, then this document would also be good. Because this document perfectly demonstrated the word subterfuge. It's not that I don't want to give it to you, it's not that I don't want to announce it, but it's not the time yet. This word subterfuge is a very correct approach for other people. After all, Jiang Hai is a person, and the South Koreans are a country. But it doesn't exist for Jiang Hai because his main business projects are in the United States. Huaxia is also connected. The South Koreans can't threaten him at all. He's probably going to leave this time, and it's unlikely that he'll come back in the future. The secret of the pasture will never be deciphered by anyone. He's more confident about this than anyone else. After all, there's only one Dragon Ball in the world, and it's now in his body. What's there to study? Therefore, the person who led this conversation between him and the South Koreans was Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai is standing in a high position, and he's looking at a country with a gaze of charity. Yes, the current Jiang Hai has such strength and ability. According to the Pro-Walton calculation, if Jiang Hai's manor were to be listed now, the cattle, the fishery, and the pasture, Jiang Hai's current wealth would be worth at least tens of billions. It wouldn't be a problem for him to become the richest man in the world. Of course, Jiang Hai is only rich. When it comes to influence, he's far behind. Yes, I understand. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tulumen also nodded. Although he doesn't know where Jiang Hai's confidence comes from, believing that his pasture is absolutely impossible to decipher, Jiang Hai's confidence can save him a lot of trouble. Of course, he will still do what needs to be done. 10 years of working life made him understand. Sometimes for some work, it's not a matter of whether you do it or not, but whether you do it or not. For example, this stack of reports. Even if he knew Jiang Hai's confidence, he would still do it. This is some of the rules of the workplace. Just like now, although Jiang Hai didn't use his report, he still praised him, didn't he? We've arrived at the Blue House. At this moment, Galena, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, suddenly said to the back of the car. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at the existence of the highest honor in South Korea. Let's go. Under the bright sun, Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes and said softly. Tulumen, who was sitting opposite him, got out of the car first and opened the door for Jiang Hai. Then, Azalina and Galena rushed over and stood next to Jiang Hai. At this time, the two had changed into casual women's suits. Their hair was tied up and they wore sunglasses. They really looked stern. In addition to the two of them, one of the two male bodyguards also came to act as a driver. After standing in place, Jiang Hai's group of 5 also walked into the Blue House. The guard had already reported the news of Jiang Hai's arrival, so when Jiang Hai walked to the door, there were already people there to greet him. Of course, with Jiang Hai's current status, the president of South Korea would not come to greet him. The people who came to greet him were the people in charge of this matter. Jiang Hai also knew 2 of them. One was the arrogant South Korean woman that Jiang Hai saw when he was selling grass. The other was the man called Li Shihuai. When he saw Jiang Hai again after Jiang Hai came here, he was filled with emotions. If he had not been shameless enough to let the two women curry favor with Jiang Hai, he might have been a fool now. How could he be like this now? This time, he also received a mission. Because he confiscated Jiang Hai's plane, the sales time was shortened and the quality of the meat was slightly damaged. Therefore, Jiang Hai's legal team asked the South Korean government to compensate them with $10 million, but they could choose not to apologize. For a country between $10 million and an apology, they naturally chose the former. How important was a country's face? As long as it could be settled with money, it was not a problem. However, the higher-ups also gave them some pressure. If the negotiations with Jiang Hai today achieved the expected result, then the $10 million would be taken by the South Korean government. If not, then Li Shihuai would take it himself. Although Li Shihuai also felt a little reluctant to take out 12 billion won, it was still within his acceptable range. However, if he could save it, it was naturally better to save it. Moreover, he thought that he had grasped Jiang Hai's weakness, which was why he was so happy today. However, if he thought that Jiang Hai was a person who was so easy to deal with, then he was wrong. Although Jiang Hai could not control his strength sometimes, if he knew that this was a trap, he would not jump into it. Chapter 834. Mr. Jiang Hai, I have been waiting for you for a long time. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai greeted him with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, stepped forward and shook hands with him, then looked at the representative over there. I didn't expect that we would meet again so soon. Looking at Jiang Hai, the arrogant representative also said softly, Yeah, but didn't you say that you have nothing to do with this matter? Now it doesn't look like you have nothing to do with it. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the person here couldn't help but chuckle. Those people seem to think that this technology of yours is extremely important, and you're very hostile, so they sent me, someone who has been in contact with you, to explore your background. Looking at Jiang Hai, this person didn't care what Jiang Hai thought and said directly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and he couldn't deny such an attitude. Please. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't care about what he said, the person also nodded with a smile, then made a gesture of invitation. He motioned to Jiang Hai to go in, but just as Jiang Hai was about to walk in, his personal phone rang. Picking it up and looking at it, he found that it was an unfamiliar phone. Jiang Hai thought for a moment, then gestured to everyone, asking them to wait a moment, and then went to the side to pick it up. Hello. Hello, who is this? After connecting the phone, Jiang Hai asked the person on the other side. Hello, my name is... I don't know if you still remember what happened last night. I'm the woman this morning. After hearing Jiang Hai's voice, the woman on the other side subconsciously wanted to say her name, but she quickly covered it up and then said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also remembered the scene this morning. Oh, of course I remember. What's the matter? Looking at this woman, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. I think we should meet. I have something to say to you. After thinking for a while, the woman said to Jiang Hai over the phone. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai touched his nose. All right. I'm at the Blue House now. If you need me, you can come over first. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai decided to tell her his location. After all, something happened last night. Jiang Hai also wanted to know why she was looking for him. I want to talk to you in private. I won't take up too much of your time. As soon as she heard the 3 words Blue House, the woman on the other side was obviously stunned for a moment. Then she gently bit her lips and said to Jiang Hai, Oh, I don't know about this. Let's wait until you come over. I don't know when it will end here. Glancing at Li Shihuai and the man beside him, Jiang Hai thought for a while and said to her, Then, okay, when I arrive, I will call you. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the woman also said a sentence and then hung up the phone. In fact, when she heard that Jiang Hai was at the Blue House, to be honest, she was a little panicked. Blue House, the highest place in South Korea. For the people of South Korea, Blue House was the same as a certain sea in Hwasia. The people who could go there were undoubtedly people that she, as a star, couldn't afford to provoke. But for her career and her family, she must go and explain it to Jiang Hai She took a deep breath, gave herself a pep talk, and directly called a taxi driver to drive to Blue House. At this time, after Jiang Hai saw her hang up the phone, he shrugged and followed the person who greeted him into the Blue House. Of course, after they entered, they couldn't walk around casually. After all, the president and the others were still working here. So they just entered a small conference room and sat down. The people here also exchanged a few pleasantries before getting to the main topic. After Li Shihuai spoke, Jiang Hai and Tulumin couldn't help but look at each other with a trace of disdain on their lips. Sure enough, the first thing South Korea wanted to do when they called Jiang Hai over was to buy out Jiang Hai's secret recipe for the growth of forage grass. For this, they were willing to pay $50 billion, which was 60 trillion won. South Korea's national GDP was $1,378 billion a year. They could give half of the country's total monthly income to Jiang Hai, which was already a large sum of money. But to be honest, 50 billion was not enough for Jiang Hai. You don't have to say that. I don't know why my forage grass is so good, let alone buying it out. If you mention this again, then I think our cooperation will end. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai gently threw the pen in his hand on the table, then leaned back in his chair and spoke with a trace of disdain on his face. If Mr. Jiang doesn't want to share the secret of forage grass, then can you transfer your manor in Winthrop? We are also very interested in it. For this, we are willing to pay $20 billion. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Shihuai hesitated for a moment before speaking to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked at him like he was an idiot. Indeed, his manor itself was not very valuable, but the grass in the manor was very valuable. Moreover, the most important thing was that no one dared to touch him now because he could still create benefits for several parties. If his manor was gone, although he could build another one, Jiang Hai estimated that no one would give him a few more years to grow. Although $20 billion was good, if Jiang Hai wanted it, he would be like a child walking on the road with gold bricks in his arms. He had to have the ability to protect this sum of money, but now it seemed that he obviously did not have such ability. Let's go. It seems that the sincerity of the South Korea side is really not that good. I really regret letting you come into contact with them. After saying that, Jiang Hai directly stood up and prepared to leave. Seeing that Jiang Hai was about to leave, the South Korea people also stood up, but their expressions were a little contradictory. Some of them had a flattering smile on their faces, while others had a touch of coldness. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile in disdain. Would these guys dare to make a move on him in the Blue House? He just laughed it off. Mr. Jiang, don't we have to talk about everything? Don't you think so? Li Shihuai also walked out at this time and stopped Jiang Hai with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked around and then slowly walked back. However, he did not take his bag and sit down. Instead, he stood there and touched the seat with his hand, slowly tapping it. If I hear one more time that you want me to sell secrets or manners, then I'll leave. From now on, the supply of pasture to the South Korea will also be suspended. You guys should be careful. Only Jiang Hai dared to speak so arrogantly to a country. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the South Korea people felt a little uncomfortable in their hearts. It was understandable. The people of South Korea were known for their strong self-esteem. In their eyes, the whole world had to acknowledge them. What they said was right. However, now that Jiang Hai actually slapped them in the face in front of them, they could not take it anymore. But fortunately, they knew that Jiang Hai was not a person to be trifled with, so they forcibly suppressed the anger in their hearts and returned to the table with a smile. Since the secret and the manor were not for sale, then it seemed that the only thing they could buy was the pasture and cooperation. According to them, they were going to raise a batch of their so-called national treasures after Jiang Hai provided them with pasture. Listening to them bragging about how awesome their Korean cows were, Jiang Hai could not help but chuckle, but he did not say anything. He just quietly watched these people bragging. Did they really think that he was Xiao Bai, who had never raised cows before? What a joke. Jiang Hai had been raising cows for 3 years. Not to mention other more detailed work, at least he could tell the quality of the cattle. At present, the best cattle in the world was naturally the Japanese cattle. Although he hated Japan, He had to admit this. Next would be the Charolais cattle, followed by the Limousin cattle. If the milk production was taken into account, then it would be the Simmental cattle. After that, it would be the German cattle, followed by the Angus cattle, and then the Mola buffalo. Purely based on the breed of cattle, the domestic Lucy yellow cattle were ranked higher than the South Korean cattle. However, the South Korea people were infatuated with their Han cattle. They boasted every day that Han cattle was a breed that could compete with Chinese cattle. In South Korea's Gangwon province, there was also a breeding ground for Han cattle. Jianghai did not like this kind of cattle. After all, it was just a cross between an ordinary European cattle and a South Korean cattle. However, since these people were willing to worship it, Jianghai could not say anything. After all, there were people in China who worshiped dogs. In this regard, Jianghai could only chuckle. After listening to them brag about 13 moves, they also explained their own intentions. They were going to build a new Han cattle breeding base in Jizhou Island. They were going to raise 1 million cows. Naturally, Jianghai was going to provide the feed for them. Unfortunately, Jianghai directly rejected them with a single sentence, so there was no more. My manor is only so big, and the amount of grass produced is only so much. If you can get the grass from Do Feynman, Luke Shawn, or John Malone, then I will sell it to you. After listening to them talk for a long time, Jianghai did not talk nonsense and directly refuted them. When they heard what Jianghai said, the South Korea people were a little confused. Li Shihuai and the others looked at Jianghai. They couldn't figure out what was going on. This was because this guy didn't play according to the rules. Chapter 835. Do you have something important to tell Jianghai? Sitting in the cafe, Azalina watched this woman in front of her with a dubious look. After hearing Azalina's words, this woman stirred the coffee in front of her as she became hesitant, because it was really a bit embarrassing for her to talk about it. Azalina also knew the woman opposite her. After all, Jianghai just took her back last night. At first, she thought she was Sun Yunju's sister or something, but now it seemed that she didn't know her. To be honest, Azalina didn't quite understand why she was looking for Jianghai. At first, she thought that she might be looking for Jianghai for some money or to threaten Jianghai, but the current situation didn't seem to be the case. The things that this woman was wearing should be of great value. Although she should be in her 30s, she had maintained herself very well and was still very beautiful. She had the aura of a rich lady. This kind of woman should not have too many problems in terms of finances. Therefore, if Jianghai wasn't here for money, then what was it for? She wasn't too sure at her heart. Sigh, let's wait until he comes. After hesitating for a while, the woman opposite her thought about it and said to Azalina. The woman opposite her was naturally none other than Han Jia. After she took a taxi to the vicinity of Chongwadi, she got out of the car and walked over after disguising herself. Although she wasn't very famous in Huaxia and other places, she had always been a goddess in Huaxia. But in South Korea, she has always been a top goddess, so even if she has been out of the movie for a while, she still has to be careful. After arriving here, she called Jianghai. Not long after the call was connected, this woman named Azalina appeared in front of her, then took her to this coffee shop and told her that Jianghai was still in a meeting with the South Korean government, so he didn't have time to talk to her for the time being. He would come over after a while. Hearing Azalina's words, Han Jia also nodded. When she came, she knew that Jianghai was a guest of honor at Chongwadi. It seemed that she would definitely be at a disadvantage. Now her only thought was to reach an agreement with Jianghai. As long as Jianghai helped her keep last night's matter a secret, everything would be easy. Thinking of this, her hand holding the coffee cup unconsciously tightened. Sorry, those guys are really annoying. I'm late. Just as she was struggling here, Jianghai also walked in from outside the coffee shop. After walking in front of Han Jia, he smiled and said something in English. Oh! After hearing Jianghai's words, Han Jia's reaction was not very enthusiastic. It was understandable. She and Jianghai actually had a grudge against each other, but this kind of grudge had to be temporarily suppressed. There was no such thing as enthusiasm. I heard that you were looking for me. Sitting next to Azalina, Jianghai looked at Han Jia in front of him and said, Are you done with your business? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jia's words were a little difficult for a while, so she could only exchange a few words. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai sighed, then shook his head. Although you're from Southern Galilee, I still have to say that your government is really a bunch of bastards. You don't know what kind of conditions they gave me in order to get me to help you build a cattle farm. With a chuckle, Jiang Hai looked at Han Jia's in front of him and said somewhat speechlessly, Back to 10 minutes ago, in the conference room of Chongwadi where Jiang Hai was, those senior officials of South Korea first asked to buy out Jiang Hai's pasture. After that failed, they wanted to buy a manor. Naturally, this also didn't work. In the case that the first two conditions didn't work, they wanted to buy more pasture. The original 900,000 tons was naturally not enough. Therefore, when they asked to increase it to 3 million tons, Jiang Hai naturally refused. Although it was 3 million or 1 million, Jiang Hai had to consider where he would get the 100,000 tons from. Although he still had some in stock, why would he sell it to South Korea? The people of South Korea mainly had these three thoughts. If the first one didn't work, the second one didn't work, and the third one didn't work, then this meeting with Jiang Hai would be meaningless, especially since Li Shihuai had been discussing with Jiang Hai how much they could increase it. But Jiang Hai was adamant that they couldn't increase it at all, unless they could take it from him. But they weren't stupid. They knew that this was simply impossible. They couldn't afford to provoke Du Feynman. He was the royal family of Dubai. The Arabs in the Middle East all wore the same pants. If they dared to go against those people, these people could join forces to mess with the United States. If the United States was messed with, they would definitely vent their anger on South Korea. After all, South Korea didn't produce oil. Luke Shawn was an international tycoon and one of the largest ranchers in the central part of the United States. They didn't dare to be arrogant. John Malone was even more so. These few big heads couldn't move, and the same was true for those small heads. That was why they were a little conflicted. Seeing that Jiang Hai was still unmoved, Li Shihuai also knew that there wouldn't be any effect if he continued to talk like this. So he thought of Jiang Hai's weakness and the habits of Huaxia people. Huaxia people were used to talking about business at the table. So he smiled and temporarily gave up on asking Jiang Hai to make a statement this morning. Instead, he made a dinner appointment in the evening to talk about it then. At this time, Jiang Hai was also a little interested in them. He wanted to see what these guys wanted to do. After making an appointment, Jiang Hai came to the coffee shop as Azalina said, Oh, since you are so busy, then I will make a long story short. I hope that no one else will know about what happened last night. Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Juren hesitated for a moment and said to Jiang Hai in a tough tone, Oh, why do you say that? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai leaned back and looked at her with some doubts. I have my own career, my own family, and I have a lovely daughter, so I don't want these to be destroyed. What happened last night was a heavy blow to my family, so I hope we can skip this part. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Juren bit her lip and said to Jiang Hai, Oh. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai shook his head. In fact, in essence, Jiang Hai is not a bad person. Of course, he is definitely not a good person. He is just an ordinary person. If Han Juren didn't come to him today and just left, maybe Jiang Hai would have forgotten about it. But this woman came to him specifically, which made Jiang Hai's soul of seeking death begin to stir. Touching his chin, he didn't agree as Han Juren imagined. I can give you money. Please forget what happened last night. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Han Juren hesitated for a moment, bit her lip, and said with a serious face, To be honest, although her family's finances are good, they are not particularly rich. They don't have to worry about food and clothing, but it is not to the point where they can squander money at will. Money, I don't need it. If you need it, I can give you some. I don't exaggerate. My annual income is billions of dollars. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a guest of honor at the Blue House, right? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shook his head. It is not his style to ask a woman for money, so he directly said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Juren couldn't help but sigh. She knew that foreigners who can come here are definitely not people that can be bought with money. But besides money, she really didn't know what else she could give him. Then, what exactly do you want? Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiren was a little discouraged because she really didn't know what to do. Looking at Jiang Hai pitifully, she was really a little confused now. Let me think about it. If I think about it, I will call you. Is the number you are calling your number? Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai also wanted to tease her, so he shook his phone at her and said to her, "Well, this is my number. If you have any requests, you can call me at any time, please." Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Han Jiren also stood up and bowed respectfully. Jiang Hai looked at her appearance and chuckled. He has to admit that sometimes teasing these women is quite interesting, just as Jiang Hai was teasing Han Jiren here on the other side of Kim Taeyan's house. Kim Taeyan and Lin Yuner were at home. Because of what happened the night before, they put off their work for the next 2 days and wanted to have a good rest at home. After a day of rest yesterday, although they were still in a bad mood today, they were much calmer. At this time, the two were watching TV at home. Although Li Shihuai is a despicable person, he is a man of his words. Jiang Hai's team contacted the South Korea side. He then sent a text message to the company that he couldn't identify. Then the company's representative personally sent a message to the two, telling them that they could rest, but they could resume work whenever they wanted, and all the company's resources were at their disposal. This was Li Shihuai's ability in South Korea, but this kind of compensation didn't make the two girls feel warm in their hearts. After seeing the text message, they didn't even reply. They continued to stay in their small space. They're in a daze. But some things couldn't be solved by running away. For example, now their phones rang again. Chapter 836. What's the matter? Lin Yun, who was watching TV and eating, asked Jean Taeyan next to her. Lin Yun, it was a girl who liked to eat very much, and she had a good appetite. She liked to eat, especially when she was sad these 2 days. She had to eat a lot every day. She didn't know if she would get fat. Maybe it was to avoid Li Shengji, but she really didn't have the face to see him now. So when Lin Yun arrived at Jean Taeyan's house, she had already turned off her phone. Now only Jean Taeyan's phone was ringing. In order not to let Li Shengji find her, Jean Taeyan had also muted her phone these days. If it wasn't someone close to them, they really couldn't find them. But now, she had to look at this text message. Hearing Lin Yun's words, Jean Taeyan also hesitated and then threw the phone aside. Nothing, just a text message from the company. Hearing what Jean Taeyan said, Lin Yun was stunned for a moment. Then, she glanced at Jean Taeyan and then instantly snatched the phone. She opened the phone and found that it was indeed a text message from the company. It was just that what was said in the text message was not as simple as Jean Taeyan thought, because it was an invitation to a cocktail party. Compared to the order a few days ago, today's words were much softer. But when she saw the words above, Lin Yun's body still trembled unconsciously, because it was written very clearly that the guest she was accompanying was Jiang Hai. They had already experienced what it meant to accompany Jiang Hai, hadn't they? We can ignore them. After all, we have sacrificed the day before yesterday. Don't be afraid. Everything will pass. Looking at Lin Yun's appearance, Jean Taeyan also sighed, then hugged Lin Yun next to her and said anxiously. She was really afraid that something would happen to her sister. At the same time, she hated her company and that Li Shihuai. Were these guys going to continue to humiliate her like this? After the first time, they still wanted the second time? Would there be a third time, a fourth time, and a fifth time in the future? Thinking of this, she couldn't help but grit her teeth. She wouldn't do this. Even if she had to fight to the death, she wouldn't let these people have it easy. No, I won't go. However, at this moment, Lin Yun suddenly raised her head. Tears had already covered her face, but her voice was still very firm. She looked at Jean Taeyan and said with a serious face. But, hearing that she was going, Jean Taeyan was at a loss. What was she going to do in such a situation? I want to see what these guys can do. Hearing what Jean Taeyan wanted to say, Lin Yun interrupted her and then said with a serious face. Seeing the anger in her eyes and the feeling of anger, Jean Taeyan sighed helplessly. Indeed, she didn't know what to do now. If Lin Yun wanted to go, then she had to accompany her. She also wanted to see what Jiang Hai and the others were going to do. If they dared to go overboard, she would take them down with her. The sky gradually darkened. Unknowingly, it was already the time mentioned in the message. After the two of them gave a simple score, they went downstairs with cold faces. They got into the car that the company had specially driven to pick them up and went to the Shilla Hotel. Looking at the night view of Seoul, the depths of the two women's hearts were as dark as the night view at this time. No one knew what the two women were thinking. On the other side, a woman who had a relationship with Jeong Hai was walking back to her home with a tired face. There was no anger in her eyes, only endless confusion. After all, Han Jia was considered a goddess-like figure in South Korea. Naturally, she had earned a lot over the years. In Seoul, housing prices were actually quite expensive. Compared to the imperial capital, it wasn't much worse. In South Korea, most of the stars rented houses in Seoul. Here, there was a division of long rent and short rent. That was another story. It had nothing to do with Jeong Hai. Most of the people who owned property bought houses in the remote areas of Seoul. However, Han Jia was still an actress who was considered a national treasure in South Korea, so she didn't lack money. In Seoul, they had their own standalone villa. Although it wasn't big, only about 150 square meters, the two-story villa was very exquisite. Like a walking corpse, she returned home. After opening the door, she looked at the empty house and leaned weakly against the door. Then she slowly squatted down and rubbed her face hard before she stood up. She looked around the house, but didn't find any trace of her husband. Because of the argument the day before, her daughter had been sent to her mother to help take care of her. The entire villa was unusually quiet this time. After meeting with Jeong Hai in the morning, she walked around the streets of Seoul alone. She didn't know how to face her husband and her child. She was really afraid that after she returned, she would be suspected by her husband because she didn't know what to say. So, for a while, other than wandering outside, she didn't have anywhere else to go. Powerless, she was like a rootless duckweed, swaying back and forth on the streets of Seoul. But no matter how much she swayed, there was a time when she had to return home. Finally, she returned home at night. But when she returned home, she was still alone. Phew, it's over, isn't it? It's just a nightmare. But why is it that when I wake up from a nightmare, reality is another nightmare? Han Jia smiled bitterly and muttered to herself. Then she stood up and went to tidy up the house. Halfway through, she heard the door open. Han Jia's husband walked in from outside in a daze. After glancing at Han Jia, he didn't want to talk too much with his beautiful wife. After glancing at her indifferently, he turned around and walked into the room. He didn't take a shower or take off his clothes. He just lay down on the bed and fell asleep. Han Jia looked at her husband and smelled the smell of alcohol and perfume on his body. Needless to say, his drinking just now was obviously not that clean. Normally, Han Jia's wife would inevitably argue with him, but now she felt that she wasn't clean. What was there to argue about? After a self-deprecating smile, Han Jia's wife sat in the kitchen on the first floor. Her eyes began to wander. At this time, in a living room of the Shilla Hotel, Li Shihuai and the others were eating with Jeong Hai. Because Li Shihuai knew that Jeong Hai didn't like to eat Korean food, he decided to eat Western food this time. As for the Chinese food that was very famous in South Korea, Li Shihuai didn't choose it. It was because the Chinese food in South Korea had changed beyond recognition. When it came to food, as a Huaxia person, Chinese food was naturally the first choice. It could be said that as long as there were people in the world, there would be Chinese restaurants. This sentence wasn't groundless. Chinese food had many characteristics. It was simple, easy, tasted good, made a lot of money, and was very inclusive, but it was also because of this that the Chinese food they ate abroad didn't feel like Chinese food at all. Jeong Hai lived in the United States. There were many Chinese restaurants in the United States, but in order to cater to the tastes of Americans, these Chinese food had been changed. Basically, they were all sour and sweet, but they weren't the sour and sweet taste of Chinese food. Jeong Hai liked to eat double-fried pork. Double-fried pork was sour and sweet. In the province, double-fried pork was made with ketchup, but the real double-fried pork was made with sugar and vinegar. Jeong Hai wasn't used to it. In the United States, almost all Chinese food was made with ketchup because Americans liked it. In South Korea, although it was quite close to huaxia, the Chinese food here was also modified. Almost all the Chinese food here was too sweet. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't like to eat it. For example, the famous jjiang noodles, seafood noodles, and so on. Jiang Hai didn't like those taste very much. In Jiang Hai's view, this is also the difference between Chinese food and French food. French food and Chinese food are known all over the world. But no matter which French restaurant it was, it represented high-end. Huaxia's restaurant was very popular. Of course, it wasn't to say that Chinese food wasn't as high-end as French food. Jiang Hai was a huaxia person. He naturally knew how terrifying huaxia's dishes were. But the problem was that those high-end dishes couldn't be spread outside. Firstly, it was because foreigners might not like the taste of those dishes. Secondly, it was because some dishes were secret and wouldn't be spread outside. Because of this, Jiang Hai would rather eat Western food than Chinese food when he was overseas. It was because the Chinese food here couldn't be considered Chinese food to cater to the local customers. What appetizers, what soup, and so on, Jiang Hai had eaten them before. Naturally, he also introduced them in detail, so he didn't say much here. The food was also served separately, but it wasn't like the last time, where there was only one person at a table. Instead, it was an oversized long table, and Jiang Hai and the others sat on both sides of it. It could be seen that the people on both sides weren't very nice. Opposite Jiang Hai was Li Shihuai, the representative he met today, 3 people he met at Qingwadai, and 3 women. A total of 8 people. On Jiang Hai's side, there was only Jiang Hai and Cheryl Li. After Azalina came back, she went to rest. She wasn't interested in these things. On the other hand, Cheryl Li liked to join in the fun. Therefore, she came along with Jiang Hai. Looking at the high officials in front of her, she was very proud. But at this time, the door of the Western restaurant was pushed open. 2 women she had seen before walked in reluctantly. Chapter 837. Oh, our teenage years are here. Come, sit down. The dishes haven't been served yet. Seeing the 2 of them walk in, Li Shihuai couldn't help but smile and say, speaking of which, he was really grateful to these 2 girls. If it weren't for them, then he would have suffered a terrible loss, and his family would have to pay for it. It was just that they sacrificed a little, and he had to pay $10 million instead of $100 million. This was 10 times the difference, $10 million. Although this was not a small sum of money, he could still afford it. Department Head Li, we have already done what we should do. What else do you want us to do? But after hearing his words, Linyan did not sit down as he said, but still stood at the door and looked at Li Shihuai angrily. Hearing her words that were 70% sarcastic and 30% angry, the atmosphere in the whole room instantly stagnated. What do you mean by this? Hearing her words, Li Shihuai's face also became ugly, and he looked at the 2 people in front of him with an unhappy face. At the same time, he tore off the cloth that had been wrapped around his collar and said with a cold face, "What do you mean? It's the meaning behind your words. What do you think we are? Do you think we're people who can come and go as you wish? When did we become your playthings? Yinny, don't stop me. I want to make it clear today. Yes, you won't let us have a good time. Do you think we will let you have a good time? At most, we'll fight to the death and go our separate ways." Hearing Li Shihuai's words, Lin Yan couldn't help but curse, probably because of what happened that day. Hearing her words, Li Shihuai's face became darker and darker. If word got out that he threatened popular female celebrities to drink and sleep with them, then this political scandal was enough for the higher-ups of South Korea to drag him down. To be able to sit in this position, it could be said that he must have made a lot of enemies. If he went down, he could indeed destroy these 2 families, but he would really be finished. In the eyes of these people, his life was much more precious than these female celebrities. What equality! This sentence was just for show. If a poor person committed a murder, even if it was a manslaughter, they would have to stay in prison for more than 10 years. However, if it was a rich person, even if it was a murder, they wouldn't even have to go to prison. Since ancient times, all crows in the world were equally black. This was also an unchanging truth. Just like what the Westerners said, Everyone had the 7 deadly sins in their bones. This was also the nature of human beings. Lust, unless they had some special hobby or were congenitally deficient. Who wouldn't like this kind of thing? Just like Jiang Hai, he admitted that he had a strong desire in that aspect. Gluttony, in Dante's Divine Comedy, was also called coveting pleasure. Who wouldn't covet such things? He could clearly live happily, so why would he have to tire himself out like a grandson? Jiang Hai was such a person. Greed. Needless to say, how many people in this world didn't love money? Laziness. There was nothing much to say about this. On Monday morning, who would be willing to get up, whether it was to go to class or go to school? If it weren't for the need to earn money to eat, it was estimated that many people would choose to lie at home, sleep until they woke up naturally, and count money until their hands cramped. Although this wasn't a positive thing, this was the essence of human nature. Anger. Anyone would be angry. In Buddhism, people would be angry. Jesus slapped the left side of the face and slapped the right side of the face. This wasn't something a normal person would do. Jealousy. Because the other party was better than oneself, whether it was a good job, more money, a beautiful girlfriend, or a good family. These were all jealousy. Who could pat their own mouth and say that they weren't jealous? Arrogance. This depended on the face. If one was good-looking, it was called arrogant. If one wasn't good-looking, it was called pretentious. Lust, gluttony, greed, laziness, anger, jealousy, and arrogance. These were the 7 deadly sins, but in fact, these are the most fundamental things of human nature. Li Shihuai was naturally not a saint. He had all these things. In his opinion, Lin Yun, and the others sacrificed themselves to accompany Jiang Hai. That was their blessing. It was what they deserved. He just leaked a little from his fingers, and it was enough to give them alms. Yes, it was alms, not compensation. This was the reality. People at their level would not bow their heads to these inferior people. But now Lin Yun said such words. How could he not be angry? Who do you think you are? You're not just an artist. You're called a star. What do you think you are? Don't you know it in your heart? Isn't your role to entertain the public? What's the difference between being coquettish on the stage and being coquettish off the stage? Looking at Lin Yun, Li Shihuai also stood up and said angrily, "You bastard." Hearing Li Shihuai's words, Lin Yun, and Kim Taeyin almost couldn't stand it at the same time. But in fact, for Jiang Hai, these words didn't seem to be wrong. After all, in the ancient times of China, celebrities were the highest class of people. Well, let's change it to a more elegant word. But their job was still the same. So, he didn't really care about celebrities. Moreover, he also heard that there were quite a lot of celebrities in South Korea who were engaged in this kind of work. After all, South Korea itself was not big, and the celebrities had fewer ways to make money. So, when these two people, now Jiang Hai still didn't know their names. When these two people entered his room, he didn't have anything to worry about. But now, looking at the situation, they didn't seem to be willing. Although Jiang Hai was a bad person, he didn't seem to have forced others to do anything. Hey, don't hurt them. Now, seeing that Kim Taeyin and Lin Yun were about to rush over like crazy, the 3 people over there also stood up for the first time. These 3 people were the people who came to negotiate, and also the people who protected these 2. Seeing the 2 women rushing over here, they also stood up. Jiang Hai saw their movements and knew that these 3 people also had a background, so he immediately shouted loudly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 3 people restrained themselves and only grabbed the hands of the 2 people in an instant. Seeing that they really couldn't get close to these people, the 2 people couldn't help but secretly snort. After glaring at Jiang Hai, they turned and left here. Watching them leave, Li Shihuai, who was still in shock, still had a face of lingering fear. These 2 guys, this is not over. Looking at the 2 people who went out, Li Shihuai said with a face of anger. Hearing Li Shihuai's words in front of him, Jiang Hai gently knocked on the table and said slowly, "This matter ends here. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that South Korea can receive 900,000 tons of fodder." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Shihuai's face also changed. Then he stood up and nodded seriously. Glancing at him, Jiang Hai thought for a while. He felt that it was a little inappropriate to let these two girls go out like this. Moreover, after such a commotion, he was not in the mood to eat, so he stood up and asked Cheryl to go back to the room first. Then he walked out by himself. When he walked out of the hotel, he happened to see Lin Yun'er sitting on the steps in front of the hotel, crying sadly. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't regret what he did the night before. But making a woman cry like this, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. After thinking for a while, he still walked over. Seeing Jiang Hai walking over, Kim Taeyin and Lin Yun both stopped crying and looked at Jiang Hai with an unfriendly face. Do you need me to say anything now? Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai said hesitantly. He was indeed a little hesitant because he didn't know what to say. It was impossible for him to admit his mistake. Moreover, he didn't think that he had done anything wrong. These two people came into his house because of Li Shihuai's plane. Logically speaking, he had already contacted the South Korea government and didn't let Li Shihuai's family die, so he was even. But now looking at them crying here, Jiang Hai really didn't know what to say. There's no need for that. To people like us, aren't you all always high and mighty? What can we ask you to say? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kim Taeyan's eyes were a little cold, and then she said with a serious face. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. He really wanted to stand up and go back, but after thinking about it, it seemed that this was not very good. Looking around, Jiang Hai waved to the waiter over there, and then said something. In less than a minute, a bunch of keys appeared in Jiang Hai's hand. Jiang Hai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He just wanted to borrow a car, but this kid seemed to be very helpful. He directly gave Jiang Hai a Rolls-Royce. Jiang Hai glanced at the car and then went to the parking lot. Not long after, a Rolls-Royce stopped in front of the two. Come on in. Although I can't call out your names now, you're public figures after all. If you're photographed sitting here crying, it will probably affect your career. I'll take you home. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai said to them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kim Taeyin couldn't help but hesitate. After all, there was a grudge between them and Jiang Hai. Let's go. It's a waste if we don't take it. I've already been, what is there to be afraid of? But Lin Yun'er seemed to be going all out. She wiped her tears and then directly pulled Kim Taeyin into the back seat of the car. After closing the door, Jiang Hai also shrugged. He was really looking for something to do, but since he had already said it, he was embarrassed to go back like this. He could only start the engine and drive forward, but they didn't notice that when the car drove away, a few lights flashed in the grass in the distance. Chapter 838. Have we arrived? Looking at Jean Taeyin, who ordered him to stop, Jiang Hai asked the two people in the back seat with some doubts. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two people also looked at him. They didn't say anything and just stared at him, making Jiang Hai feel a little embarrassed. As mentioned before, Jiang Hai is not a saint, but he is not a heartless person. Now seeing them in so much pain and struggling, to be honest, he is a little embarrassed. We haven't arrived yet. Say something. Seeing that the two of them didn't speak, Jiang Hai couldn't help but scratch his head, then said helplessly. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the two of them also took a deep breath. Don't think that we will thank you and forgive you just because you sent us back. Looking at Jiang Hai, Jean Taeyin thought for a while and said first. In fact, her thoughts about Jiang Hai are indeed a little strange, but even if Jiang Hai pretends to be a good person now, he can't get their forgiveness. After all, Jiang Hai did such an excessive thing to them. To be honest, I don't need your words of gratitude and forgiveness, because to a certain extent, I don't owe you anything. After all, I have done what I promised you. Hearing what Jean Taeyin said, Jiang Hai shrugged. He has always been a donkey that goes with the flow. If you go against him, there will be no good result. You bastard. Then why did you send us back, bastard? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lin Yun'er couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shrugged lightly. Maybe I suddenly owed you, but whether you're grateful to me or not, whether you forgive me or not, It doesn't matter to me because I will probably leave South Korea the day after tomorrow, and then I probably won't be able to come back in this life. Hearing her words, Jeong-hai also shrugged. To be honest, there is really nothing for Jeong-hai to miss in South Korea. You scum. Hearing Jeong-hai's words, the two couldn't help but be stunned. Then Kim Tae-in opened the door, said something to Jeong-hai, and left with Lin Yun. After getting out of the car, the two seemed to be afraid that Jeong-hai would follow them. They ran directly into the darkness. Jeong-hai looked at their backs and couldn't help but curl his lips. Scum? Is there a scum like me? It seems that I am indeed quite a scum. Forget it, scum is scum. But this nickname is a little unfair. After all, I haven't done anything too scum. Looking at the two disappearing, Jeong-hai curled his lips and sat in the driver's seat self-deprecatingly. Looking at the night scenery outside, Jeong-hai couldn't help but smile helplessly. I didn't even have dinner. I will eat after going back to the hotel. Shaking his head, Jeong-hai was about to start the engine and go back. But just as he was about to leave, the door of the villa in front of him suddenly opened. Then a young woman in casual clothes walked out with some garbage and threw it into the trash can on the roadside, waiting for the garbage truck to take it away tomorrow. Looking at this young woman, Jeong-hai suddenly froze. Because this woman, he actually knew her. Scum? Then let's see what scum do. Recalling the words of the two people just now, Jeong-hai's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Then he got out of the car and slowly walked to the front of the villa. After the young woman just threw the garbage, she had already gone back. Jeong-hai walked to the front of the villa, picked up the phone, and dialed the number on it. Didu Yamasayo, hello? Maybe. After the phone rang twice, a female voice came from the other side of the phone. Listening to this familiar female voice, Jeong-hai also chuckled. It's me. Facing the female voice on the phone, Jeong-hai said very plainly, I know, what's the matter? Hearing Jeong-hai's words, the female voice on the other side was obviously anxious. She lowered her voice and said to Jeong-hai. Hearing her words, Jeong-hai also smiled. It seems that she is very afraid of me. I suddenly have something to tell you. Can you please open the door? Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jeong-hai said with a smile, and hearing what Jeong-hai said, the woman was clearly stunned. What do you mean? After thinking about it, she asked Jeong-hai directly. It means literally, I'm outside your house. Hearing her words, Jeong-hai also chuckled and said, Bang! After Jeong-hai said this, the female voice on the other side also hung up the phone instantly. After waiting for about 10 seconds, the door opened. In front of Jeong-hai, a frightened face appeared. The owner of the face is called Han Jaron. Why are you here? Did you investigate me? Or did you follow me? No matter what the reason is, please leave immediately. My husband is at home. Looking at Jeong-hai, Han Jaron said to him in a trembling voice. At the same time, she lowered her voice for fear of being heard by others, and her eyes were full of panic. Don't be too nervous. I just happened to pass by here and saw you taking out the trash. I don't have any malice. I'm just a little hungry, so I came to find something to eat. Hearing her words, Jeong-hai smiled and shrugged at her. You just want to eat? Hearing Jeong-hai's shameless remarks, Han Jaron really didn't know what to say, but she didn't dare to be too excited to anger Jeong-hai or attract other people, so she could only ask while gritting her teeth. Of course. Hearing her words, Jeong-hai also nodded and said to her with a smile. Then come in. Hearing what Jeong-hai said, she glanced back upstairs, then said softly. Then she stepped aside and let Jeong-hai in. After Jeong-hai came in, he didn't make any sound. After changing his shoes, he looked at this small villa. He has to admit that this small villa is really exquisite. It has a homey feeling. Where are your husband and child? Looking at Han Jaron, who came back, Jeong-hai asked with some doubts. My husband drank and is sleeping upstairs. The child is with my mother. Hearing Jeong-hai's words, Han Jaron also lowered her voice and said to Jeong-hai. Then she didn't give him any face and went straight into the kitchen. And Jeong-hai looked at her, touched his chin, then followed her into the kitchen. There are only ramen and rice cakes. Can I cook ramen with rice cakes? Seeing Jeong-hai come in, Han Jiren, who opened the refrigerator door and looked around, raised her head, holding 2 packs of shinramen and a box of rice cakes in her hand, and asked Jiang Hai. Yes, Jiang Hai never liked to eat instant noodles, but now is not the time to be picky, so he said with a smile. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiren also began to cook. As for Jiang Hai, he was looking at this small villa. There are 3 rooms on the first floor of the small villa. One of them is a large bathroom, and the other one should be a children's room, because the floor of the room is made of foam, with English letters and some patterns on it, making it convenient for children to crawl on it. The other room should be the reception room, and in addition, there is the kitchen. At the same time, Jiang Hai also came upstairs quietly. There are 3 rooms upstairs, but they're all occupied. Among them, a man is sleeping in the largest bedroom at this time. This man has a big nose and single eyelids. He is not handsome, but he is a little handsome. At least in Jiang Hai's eyes, he is very ordinary. It seems that this person should be Han Jiren's husband. Why are you here? Just when Jiang Hai saw her husband there, Han Jiren suddenly appeared behind Jiang Hai, then pulled Jiang Hai's clothes and whispered nervously and fearfully, "Come and see my enemy." Looking at Han Jiren's appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Suddenly, he wanted to tease her. After saying this, he directly pulled her into his arms, then lowered his head and kissed her. When Han Jiren was attacked by Jiang Hai, her first thought was to struggle away, but after struggling for a while, she saw her husband through the gap of the door. Her struggling suddenly stopped, because she was afraid that if she moved too much, she would wake her husband up. She could only stand there stiffly and let Jiang Hai attack her. And soon, Jiang Hai was not satisfied with just the lips, and his hands began to attack her. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Han Jiren's shame, fear, and fear, she actually had a trace of feeling that she should not have, and her legs unconsciously clamped together. Feeling her movements, Jiang Hai's hand also slid down, but at this time, Han Jiren suddenly pushed Jiang Hai away. "Do you still want to eat noodles? If not, then leave." Looking at Jiang Hai, she panted and said to him angrily, "Eat, of course. Not only do I want to eat noodles, I also want to eat you." Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai leaned over and said to her, You rogue, you bastard." "No, not here." Feeling Jiang Hai leaning over again, Han Jiren was also embarrassed and angry. But she found that it was impossible to point at Jiang Hai's conscience now, so she could only grit her teeth and say to Jiang Hai. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. If it can't be here, it proves that it can be somewhere else. Jiang Hai has never been a good person. He is also very sure of this. Now that the arrow is on the bow, he has to shoot. How can he be polite? He picked up Han Jiren, quickly went to the first floor, and entered the empty children's room. At this time, Han Jiren's husband, who was sleeping upstairs, frowned slightly. He seemed to feel something in his sleep. Chapter 839. "Hello, Jiang Hai, what are you doing?" Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. A few years ago, this voice was more familiar to Jiang Hai than Chi Li because the owner of the voice was also one of his best friends, Su Wei. "I'm in South Korea. I'm here to talk about some things." "What's the matter?" Hearing Su Wei's familiar voice, Jiang Hai asked him. He hadn't seen Su Wei for more than half a year. During the new year, he went back and played with them. After that, Su Wei stayed in the United States and didn't go back for a while. Xiang Hua's wife is about to give birth. "Do you know?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei also said to Xiang Hua, "Oh, I heard about it. Is she about to give birth?" When Jiang Hai returned to China, Xiang Hua's wife was confirmed to be pregnant. Now that he thought about it, the expected date of birth seemed to be in the near future. "Well, he was too embarrassed to ask if you were coming back, so I called you to ask." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei couldn't help but smile and say, "Indeed, this matter was not like a wedding. This gift couldn't be avoided. If he called to give birth to a child, it would be like asking for a gift, so Xiang Hua was too embarrassed. Of course, in fact, even if Jiang Hai knew about it, the gift would not be too expensive. First, Jiang Hai was not a spendthrift. Money and other things were given for free. For example, when others got married, he gave 100,000 yuan. If he had something to do, others would give 500 yuan back. Jiang Hai didn't care. He was not such a person. Second, they didn't pay attention to this. They paid attention to the number of gifts they gave, and all their friends gave the same number of gifts. Whether you have money or not, the gifts are the same. Everyone has to live by themselves. People can't expect others to live. Therefore, when Jiang Hai's buddies got married, Jiang Hai always gave them the same amount of money. He didn't pretend to be rich, and when he was really suffering, he didn't borrow a single cent from his buddies. This was the dignity of a human being. As long as he could endure and cross this hurdle, he would not open his mouth. That was the kind of person he was. If someone was here, he would say it out loud. How could he still be considered a good friend if he made such a clear distinction? Jiang Hai wanted to say that it was precisely because they were good friends that they had to separate things clearly. Of course, it depended on what it was. For example, if you went out to eat or play, it didn't matter who had more money. But if you were borrowing money, since you were good friends, you had to think for the other party. If he lent you money, would his family be unwilling to accept it? Definitely. No matter if it was his parents or his wife, they would definitely say something. Since borrowing money from others is a burden to his family, why should he borrow money from others? Therefore, unless Jiang Hai said that someone in his family was going to have an operation tomorrow and he didn't have enough money, he wouldn't borrow money from others even if he were to sell his house and land. His friend were basically in the same way. Go back when... Hearing his words, Jiang Hai calculated in his heart and asked him, Go back when... About this half a month? After thinking for a while, Su Wei said with uncertainty, It should be fine. After I finish my business in South Korea, I will also go back to China. I will make a trip back to Bing City then. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to Su Wei with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei also responded. Then the two chatted for a while and hung up the phone. After watching Jiang Hai hang up the phone, the people on the other side came over. What's the matter? Looking at Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai said to him with a smile. Nothing. Whose turn is it? Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to him, It's your turn. I'm on the green. Looking at Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai also said with a smile. Last night, after he had a meal at Han Jia's house, he went back to the hotel. Just after he came back, Cheryl Li told him that because he didn't have a good dinner today, Li Shihuai invited Jiang Hai to go out to play in their own name tomorrow. He asked Jiang Hai what he wanted to play, whether it was golf or fishing. To be honest, rich people only did that sort of thing. Fishing in the sea, playing golf, riding a horse, and so on. There are many horses in Jiang Hai's manor, and he also has a Shire horse. Going to sea? He is about to vomit from sitting on a boat. So there is nothing fun about going to sea. As for playing golf, Jiang Hai has never played before, so he agreed to go and have a look. Early this morning, after Jiang Hai had breakfast, he took Cheryl Li and Azalina to a car arranged by Li Shihuai and went to a golf course near Seoul. After Jiang Hai tried out how to hit the ball, they went straight to the actual practice. Playing golf is not as simple as imagined. It is really difficult for people who have never practiced to hit that small ball. Moreover, it is not easy to control the strength. At the same time, there are quite a lot of golf clubs. Jiang Hai has never played this before, so he is not clear about it. Fortunately, Li Shihuai is a person who often plays this kind of thing. So under his guidance, Jiang Hai slowly figured out some tricks. At the same time, he directly bought a set. It is definitely the top club in South Korea. In the future, he can play by himself when he has nothing to do. While he was on the phone, Su Wei called him. After Jiang Hai picked up the call, he continued to make calls. Originally, Jiang Hai planned to come to South Korea for 3 to 5 days. After solving the matter, he will not return to the United States directly. Instead, he will go to the capital first. After all, he and Chile have not seen each other for a while. This time, he is so close to South Korea. If he does not go and see her, Jiang Hai will not know what to say. So, he decided to go back and see her first. As for Hua Hua's child, he can also go and see him on the way. Anyway, from his point of view, he has nothing to do at the moment. The cattle in the manor have been bought. The cattle and fish are all on the right track. There is nothing for him to worry about. The only thing he is concerned about now are only 2 points. One is the Native American treasure, and the other is the person who may be related to the Dragon Badge. It is not too late to return to the United States when there is news about either of these 2 things. As for Li Shihuai, although he also knows that it is unlikely to negotiate with Jiang Hai again before Jiang Hai leaves, it does not prevent him from building a relationship with Jiang Hai. As long as his relationship with Jiang Hai is in place, if there is anything in the future, he could be considered someone who can speak for him. He has to admit that this guy's vision is very accurate. While Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai are playing golf, the entertainment industry of South Korea is in an earthquake at this time. The source of the earthquake is naturally Girls' Generation. Last night, the photo of Lin Yun-er and Kim Tae-in sitting in front of the Shilla Hotel crying was taken quite clearly. Then, the photo of them getting into a Rolls-Royce was also quite clear. Although the photo of Jiang Hai is not taken clearly, this photo is quite shocking. Although Girls' Generation is not as popular as it was a few years ago, it is still considered a national girl group after all. 2 very famous members getting into a person's car at this time. This, to be honest, it would be strange if it is not shocked. There is no Weibo in South Korea. The main social network is called Sawonet, and there is also Twitter and Facebook, collectively known as SNS. At this time, on SNS, it is extremely shocking. In addition, in the Orthodox entertainment news, this news is also constantly attracting the attention of the public. In the midst of this storm, the company that the 2 of them were in first issued a statement, saying that the 2 of them appeared at the Shilla Hotel last night because the 2 of them were going to star in a show. Because of the resources, they could choose any show they wanted. Then, perhaps because they did not have a good relationship, they lost control and cried. The person who drove the car and locked them up is a good friend of the 2. If there is any gossip, it would not be so blatant. After reading the management company's words, those who were originally shocked quieted down a little. In the eyes of these people, it is just like what the management company said. If there is really any relationship announcement, it should be with 1 person, not 2 people. There are also people who directly think that this might be the management company's hype. Other than these people who know but will not say it, or will not think this way at all, there are also some people who know something but will not say it. For example, Lee Shingji. When he saw the 2 women at the Shilla Hotel the day before yesterday, his 6th sense told him that he had been cheated on. Therefore, he frantically called Lin Yun-er's phone number, wanting to know why, or he wanted to have a clear answer. Unfortunately, after calling for 2 days, he still could not beat her. When he went to the company to look for her, she was not at the company. When he went to wait for her outside her house, she did not go home. This made him quite angry, but as an artist, he also had his own reasons. Although he felt that his heart was about to explode, he still had to attend an event today. Actually, rather than an event, it would be better to call a party because the person who organized this event was the 4th generation of the Lee family. In order to show his positive image, every year, this person would come out to find some celebrities, donate money, do shows, and so on. There were no reporters filming, but it would be published in the newspapers. This was also positive news, so he would not let it go. Chapter 840. Hey, Shungji here. Li Shingji had just arrived at the gathering place in his van, a golf course near Seoul. Many people looked at him, and he quickly sorted out his mood in the car, and then walked out of the car with a smile. As soon as he got out of the car, someone shouted at him. Hearing the owner of this voice, Li Shingji also looked at the other party, and then the smile on his face became bigger, but there was a trace of disgust in his eyes. He also knew the person who came over. His name is MC Meng. He used to be second to none in South Korea's hip-hop industry, but South Korea had military service. He once escaped the military service, and after he came back, the public didn't buy it very much. So he has always hoped to enter people's eyes through some activities. Li Shingji and him were related mainly because they were both hosts of 2 days and 1 night. But to be honest, the currently popular Li Shingji didn't really like this older brother of his. But on the surface, they still had to maintain harmony. "Brother, you came so early." Looking at MC Meng, who came over, Li Shengji also said politely, "Hey, I have nothing to do anyway, so I came over to take a look first, but today there are really a lot of seniors and actors. You can help to introduce them later." Hearing Li Shengji's words, MC Meng said with a smile. Hearing what he said, although Li Shengji was smiling on his face, he was sneering in his heart. The two of them slowly walked into the golf club as if they were really familiar with each other. Li Shengji couldn't help but nod his head when he saw it. He was indeed worthy of being the legitimate heir of the three-star Li family. His charisma was far from what ordinary people could compare to. There are a lot of artists who were invited like Li Shengji. Even Han Jia, who had just given birth a while ago and had not yet returned, came with her husband. Everyone was wearing golf clothes at this time, and they were chatting. The most dazzling person in the crowd was naturally today's host, Li Jihao. Seeing Li Shengji coming, Li Jihao also greeted him with a smile. "Shengji is here." Looking at Li Shengji, Li Jihao smiled and said, in fact, the relationship between the two was very good. Of course, Li Shengji didn't have the qualifications to be a good friend of the three-star crown prince. They had a good relationship, but no one knew why. Perhaps it was because they hit it off, or perhaps it was because, after knowing who Li Shengji's girlfriend was, Li Jihao felt that he would definitely make friends with this person. "Mr. Li." Hearing his words, Li Shengji immediately said with a smile on his face. MC Meng next to him, after seeing his appearance, and Li Jihao didn't know what to say. After all, he was eager to get close to such a person, but he couldn't say anything to such a person. He could only look at Li Shengji. Li Shengji nodded. However, it was obvious that Li Shengji had no intention of introducing this person to his brother. "I saw the news yesterday. Is there anything wrong?" Looking at Li Shengji, Li Jihao asked with concern. As for why he cared so much, no one knew. Perhaps it was just a form of concern. "There's nothing wrong. I just went to the audition, but the result was not ideal." He naturally knew what Li Jihao was talking about, but now he couldn't say anything else. He could only respond with a smile. Hearing his words, Li Jihao also smiled. However, just as they were about to say something, some people suddenly came in from outside. Seeing these people coming in, many people in the hall looked at them, and the people over there also looked at them. When their eyes met, many people's faces showed a trace of expression, but they concealed it very well. For example, Li Shengji saw two people he was very familiar with among those people, Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai. At the same time, in the crowd, Han Jia also saw Jiang Hai and remembered what had happened last night and the night before. Her gaze was somewhat evasive, but she knew that this was not the time to panic. After all, her husband was still by her side, so she forcibly suppressed her desire to avoid his gaze and looked elsewhere. Li Jihao also looked at Jiang Hai, because he also knew Jiang Hai. He didn't know if anyone had any impression of him. Jiang Hai and Li Jihao once had a feud. The reason for their feud was in Atlantic City. When Jiang Hai went to look for Du Feynman happened to be playing cards there. Li Jihao was one of them, and he took a fancy to Frau Walton. Some unpleasant things happened between him and Jiang Hai, but after returning, he was warned not to cause trouble for Jiang Hai. However, at this time, when he saw Jiang Hai here, he couldn't help but squint his eyes, but he soon gave up. It was impossible for him not to know that Jiang Hai was here, and the reason why he didn't dare to do anything was because he knew that he couldn't touch Jiang Hai now. Not to mention him, even his father couldn't touch Jiang Hai, because to some extent, Jiang Hai was now doing business with South Korea. If he made Jiang Hai unhappy, his family would also suffer losses. Therefore, he only glanced at Jiang Hai, then looked away. The people on both sides didn't seem to interfere with each other, and they just brushed past each other. Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai went to the balcony on the second floor together. They were going to rest there. Jiang Hai and the others came early this morning, and they had already played 2 rounds just now. To be honest, Jiang Hai was still fine, but Li Shihuai's physical strength was already a little exhausted. Jiang Hai wasn't particularly interested in this sport, so he suggested that they take a rest, and Li Shihuai naturally wouldn't disagree. This hall was one of the main halls of the golf club. The first floor was the hall, and people took a small battery-powered car to play golf. There was a place on the second floor for people who didn't know how to play, and for the women. Of course, there were also places to rest and eat. Jiang Hai. Looking at Jiang Hai going upstairs, although Li Shengji still had some headaches, he still remembered that he had offended Jiang Hai. Recently, because of his girlfriend's matter, he had forgotten about it. Now that he saw Jiang Hai, he remembered it. Shengji knows that guy. Hearing Li Shengji's words, Li Zhihao looked at him with some surprise. Although he and Li Shengji called each other brothers, he didn't think that Li Shengji was at the same level as himself. Although he didn't want to admit it, Jiang Hai was indeed at the same level as himself. Jiang Hai's pasture, beef, and fish were very popular in the world now. As the legitimate son of Samsung, he was naturally very clear about it. So although he didn't want to admit it, Jiang Hai was indeed at the same level as him. This was not a lie. Oh, I don't know him, it's just, does Mr. Li also know Jiang Hai? Hearing Li Zhihao's words, Li Shengji said a little awkwardly. Hearing his words, Li Zhihao also smiled. He had nothing to hide. I know that guy, but I have a grudge with that guy. Shrugging, he said to Li Shengji. Hearing what he said, Li Shengji's original intention of asking him for a referral disappeared. If there is a grudge, then it's better not to go over and make things worse. After a bright smile, he didn't say much. But during the break, he can go upstairs and talk to Jiang Hai, hoping that Jiang Hai can let him go. Okay, we should go play golf. Seeing that Li Shengji didn't talk anymore, Li Zhihao also said loudly. Then he clapped his hands, indicating that everyone was ready to go. Of course, they couldn't all go. A golf team will not have more than 4 people. Most of them are 3 or 2. Even if it's not a serious game, the rules still have to be followed. So Li Zhihao only picked 3 people with better skills and some followers to play golf together. Those who were not selected could only go to the second floor. At most, they could only meet this Samsung's son. However, although they didn't have a relationship with Li Zhihao, since they came to play, they had to play. Thus, after going up to the second floor, everyone either gathered together to chat or swung their poles for fun. When these people went upstairs, Jiang Hai in the distance also noticed them. The place where Jiang Hai is now is the place to rest. After they sat down, Zhao Lina took the tea leaves and cups that Jiang Hai brought to make tea. He didn't dare to drink anything in South Korea. Who knows if there will be any problems in it? Although it's not that these people in South Korea dared to do such a thing to him. It's better to be vigilant. After Jiang Hai's tea leaves were served, Li Shihuai was also shocked. The ethnic culture of South Korea was inherited from Huaxia. Naturally, they were also very interested in tea, but unfortunately, whether it was South Korea or another country with an inheritance, Japan, they didn't produce much tea. However, Japan played with matcha, so their tea ceremony was still quite famous in the world. As for the South Korea side, they really don't understand tea. However, those officials, especially the high-ranking officials, are bound to be cultured. Just like Li Shihuai, he also drinks tea. However, his tea leaves, which are usually envied by others, are inferior to Jiang Hai's tea. Jiang Hai prefers Westlake Longjing, and these tea leaves were also planted by him. After brewing, the extremely unusual aroma instantly made Li Shihuai lose his composure. Give Minister Li some tea leaves to try. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai also said with a smile, "He has these things." Chapter 841. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Li Shengji was dumbfounded. He suddenly thought of a possibility. Xinluo Hotel, his girlfriend, the crying figure that night, when Jiang Hai's car drove away, it was as if all these things had overlapped. When he thought of this, his brain was about to explode. What kind of F***king melodramatic scene was this? Wasn't this something that only appeared in those bloody NTR stories? Why did it appear in his body? When he thought of this, he felt that his breathing was not very smooth. His vision darkened, and he was about to sit down, but fortunately he held on. Now, he felt that there was a ball of fire burning in his mouth. His eyes instantly turned red. Now, his first thought was to take a knife and cut Jiang Hai and Lin Yin this pair of B****s starts. Especially Lin Yin. When she was with him, She made all kinds of excuses. What about acting on TV? It didn't count. What about being inexperienced? What about being unfamiliar? These were all nonsense. Could it be that the skills she learned on TV were all given to Jiang Hai? That be asterisk TCH, that be asterisk starred. Li Shengji's whole body was trembling as he recalled Jiang Hai and Lin Yun's appearance. It was hard for him to imagine and accept this. He had been cuckolded. Haha. Thinking of this, he really had the urge to die. Fortunately, he was a very utilitarian person and was very open-minded. Li Shengji might not be good at other things, singing, dancing, and acting. After all, you couldn't ask an actor who didn't even have acting skills to sing well, right? But his plan for his life was really good, and it was also very strong. He belonged to the wolf type of person. As long as he was given a chance, he would succeed no matter what. He would not allow Jiang Hai to ruin his career, and that included Lin Yun. Therefore, he quickly took 2 deep breaths and suppressed the anger in his heart. He forcibly adjusted his expression and revealed a smile once again. Then he walked back into the club, but he kept texting Lin Yun. Unfortunately, Lin Yun did not reply. But this time, he would not give up so easily. In fact, he already knew that Lin Yun was at Kim Tae-yeon's house. The reason why he didn't go to find her was, firstly, to avoid awkwardness, and secondly, to leave some face for both parties. But now he had to go. After Li Jihao returned, he told Li Jihao that he was not feeling well and left. First, he went back to the company to get his car. After putting on a disguise, he drove to Kim Tae-yeon's apartment. For a team like Girls' Generation, they naturally had their own dorm room. But to be honest, after they became popular a few years ago, almost no one lived in a dorm room anymore. After the 9 people became 8 people that year, the dormitory became even more deserted, so basically no one would stay in the dormitory. Unless it was very late at night and there was no place to stay, the dormitory would always be empty, and the company naturally couldn't take back the dormitory. This was also one of their privileges. Li Shengji drove to a roadside shop and bought some food casually. After eating lunch, Li Shengji drove to the gate of the community where Kim Tae-yeon lived. He waited from noon to night until about 5 o'clock in the evening. When he couldn't wait any longer and was about to knock on Kim Tae-yeon's door, the 2 figures appeared outside the community. Seeing that the 2 had finally appeared, Li Shengji breathed a sigh of relief. He immediately got out of the car and came to the 2. Although the 2 were wrapped tightly and didn't have any makeup on, ordinary passersby wouldn't be able to recognize them. However, Li Shengji was very familiar with one of them, so he stopped them in front of the 2 in a few steps. Shengji Appa, seeing the person in front of her, Lin Yun was stunned for a moment. Then she said, somewhat woodenly. Kim Tae-yeon looked at Li Shengji in front of her, but there was a trace of vigilance in her eyes. She knew very well that Li Shengji was very smart and very conceited. He should have guessed most of what happened that day, but she didn't know that he hadn't appeared in the past few days. But now that he appeared, it was destined to not be a good thing. She didn't want Lin Yun to get hurt again. Looking at the 2 in front of him, Li Shengji really didn't know what to say at this time. Looking at the innocent Lin Yun in front of him, he really wanted to go up and slap her, and then tell her, "You bitch, I already know about your scandal." But he resisted because he knew that if he said that, his career would be over. As long as Lin Yun didn't appear in front of Jiang Hai tonight, then Jiang Hai would call Li Shihuai, and he would be completely finished. So now he had to beg this woman who made him a cuckold and beg her to save him. But there was really no way to say these words when they were at the tip of his tongue, especially when there was a woman beside him. Shengji Appa, what's the matter? Looking at the silent and extremely awkward atmosphere in front of her, Kim Tae-yeon thought for a while and said to Li Shengji. Hearing her words, Li Shengji calmed down a little and smiled at her. Tae-yeon, can you let me talk to Yinner alone? Looking at Kim Tae-yeon, Li Shengji asked her. Li Shengji was born in 1987, and Kim Tae-yeon was born in 1989. The 2 also knew each other because of Lin Yun, so it didn't matter if they called each other by name. Hearing Li Shengji's words, Kim Tae-yeon also looked at Lin Yun. Only wait for me. Hearing Li Shengji's words, Lin Yun also calmed down. She had to face this matter eventually. Taking a deep breath, after Lin Yin persuaded Kim Tae-yun to leave, she motioned for Lee Seung-ji to go to the side to talk. Then the two came to a corner on the side, and Kim Tae-yun stayed where she was. Seung-ji appa, I'm sorry. After walking to the corner, Lin Yin took a deep breath and spoke first. Indeed, she couldn't stay silent for such a matter. In her opinion, this was her choice. Yin-er, I understand. This matter is not entirely your responsibility. Lowering his head, Lee Seung-ji suppressed his anger and said to Lin Yin, with a smile on his face. Now he kept telling himself that absolutely, he couldn't get angry. Appa. Hearing Lee Seung-ji's words, Lin Yin-er's eyes suddenly turned red, and she looked at Lee Seung-ji gratefully. You are Jiang Hai. Looking at Lin Yin-er's appearance, Lee Seung-ji sighed and then slowly said, how did you know? Hearing what he said, Lin Yin was a little confused. It seemed that Lee Seung-ji really knew. A few days ago, because of a small matter, I accidentally offended him. He wanted to send Lee Shi-huai to ban me. You know Lee Shi-huai. He is a high-ranking person in South Korea. He is far from someone a small shrimp like me can afford to offend. So today, I went to beg him, but he told me that if I don't want to be banned, then I have to ask you to go to him. Lee Seung-ji looked at Lin Yin. His face was a little ashamed, a little annoyed, and a little embarrassed. In fact, he really wanted to beat Lin Yin up and then fight with Jiang Hai, but he knew that he couldn't. He couldn't deny his efforts over the years just because of these two people. He was already 29 years old this year. He was no longer young. He didn't have so much time to fight, so he had to protect his current achievements. Appa, what do you mean by this? Originally, Lin Yin thought that she would get comfort and love from Lee Seung-ji. If he could say something like, let's start over, she would really be moved to death. But this scene was not right. Why did he tell her that Jiang Hai was looking for her? What did this mean? Yin-er, can I trouble you with one thing? Hearing Lin Yin-er's trembling voice, Lee Seung-ji also raised his head and looked at Lin Yin-er as he said slowly. Hearing his words, Lin Yin-er's tears couldn't stop. At night, around 10:30 p.m., Jiang Hai slowly took the elevator back to his floor. The plane tomorrow was ready. Tomorrow, he would go to Huaxia alone, and Cheryl, Azalina, Galina, and Wallace would go back to the United States. Now that the matter in South Korea was over, Jiang Hai naturally had to go back to Huaxia to see Chi Li and the others. The three people there also had to go back to the United States. After Wallace went back, she would continue to control the news. Azalina and Galina had to go back to the manor to protect the safety of the girls. Everything had to be back on track. As for Jiang Hai's own safety, he didn't need to worry about it. Secondly, after he arrived at Huaxia, Du Ning and Chi Li would be there. Thinking of Du Ning and Chi Li, Jiang Hai hadn't seen them for a long time. Last time, Chi Li said that she would go back to find a manager and arrange the company. Then, she went to find Jiang Hai. This time, she was gone for several months, which made Jiang Hai a little depressed. But thinking about it, if she saw Chi Jie and Chi Ya, it seemed that he would be even more depressed. Shaking his head, he didn't think about these things for the time being. He forced himself to be spirited, walked to the door of his room, opened the door, and walked in. But as soon as he walked in, he found that the atmosphere in the room was a bit wrong. Wallace and Galina, who stayed in the room, were looking at Jiang Hai with a funny face at this time. A figure was sitting on the sofa over there. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, this figure also stood up and looked directly at Jiang Hai. You really came. That Lee Seung-ji is amazing. He can even invite you over like this. Looking at the woman standing in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. This Lee Seung-ji is really good. His charm is really great. He can even invite people over like this, but she... Who is she? Chapter 842. Since you're here, let's go in. Looking at Lin Yuner in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and walked into his room. Looking at Jiang Hai's actions, Lin Yuner also sighed. It seemed that tonight, this matter would not end well. But then she laughed at herself. This kind of thing, if it happened once, there would be a second time. And this time, it was the man she thought was the closest to her who pushed her into this pit of fire. Tightening her clothes, Lin Yuner walked into Jiang Hai's room. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, she closed her eyes. I said that I won't force others to do anything. If you don't want to, you can leave at any time. Looking at her, Jiang Hai sat on the ground, looked at her, and said very plainly, I only hope that after tonight, everything will return to its original state. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lin Yuner spoke in strange English to Jiang Hai, but her eyes were full of determination. Then she took off her coat in front of Jiang Hai, revealing her perfect figure. As you wish. Looking at Lin Yuner's serious look, Jiang Hai also smiled and walked over. There was no need to describe in detail what happened after that. That night, Lin Yuner didn't even know when she fell asleep. But to be honest, apart from the inner entanglement, she was still quite attached to Jiang Hai. That feeling of attacking her soul really made her unable to stop. When she woke up the next day, she was the only one left in the room. The traces of the existence of Jiang Hai and others had disappeared at this time. She only found Jiang Hai's business card beside her. At the same time, there was an address. She understood what Jiang Hai meant. This was to tell her that if there was anything in the future, she could call this number or go to this place. Although she really wanted to throw these two things away, Lin Yuner somehow stuffed these two things into her clothes. Then, she packed up and left the hotel. Looking at the rare sunlight outside, she didn't know if the matter had come to an end. In fact, it was indeed so. Since Lin Yuner had already come yesterday, Lin Yuner didn't know if it was the end of the matter. Jiang Hai couldn't hold on to an artist. So when he left this morning, he called Li Shihuai and told him that Li Shengji didn't have to target him anymore. It was best to take care of Lin Yuner and Kim Taeyin. In order to thank him for his help, Jiang Hai added 10 tons and 100 tons of fodder to the annual 90 tons of Southern Galley. Of course, he didn't add this thing because he had slept with a few girls here. It was because he originally wanted to sell these. This could be considered as taking a step back in order to advance. Unfortunately, the people of Southern Galley were still cheering for this. When they arrived at the Incheon airport, Azalina, Galina, Hua Lizi, Cheryl, as well as the staff and 2 bodyguards, boarded the plane that Jiang Hai had specially rented. He was already thinking about whether he should get a plane for himself. But even if he had such thoughts, he would have to wait until he returned to the United States. After watching everyone leave, he bought a first-class ticket and flew directly from Southern Galley to the capital of Huaxia. Southern Galley wasn't far from Huaxia. At least, it was much closer than flying to the United States. Jiang Hai seemed to have just sat on the plane for a while, and the plane had already informed him that it was about to land. After waiting for a while, the plane landed at the capital airport. Jiang Hai carried his luggage, a backpack, and walked out of the airport's special passage. Jiang Hai didn't like to take too many things with him when he went out. In his backpack, there was only a set of clothes, a few pairs of underwear, and a mobile phone charger. That was all, so a small backpack could fit everything. If he needed something, he would spend money to buy it. In any case, he had plenty of money now. After leaving the capital airport, Jiang Hai took a taxi and went directly to the Chile group. After waiting for a while, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at this huge building. To be honest, this seemed to be the first time Jiang Hai came to Chile's company. In the past, he had only seen it in some photos at most. Now it seemed that this Chi group was really terrifying. Unlike ordinary companies that rented office buildings, the Chi group itself occupied a huge office building. There was only one company in the whole building, the Chi group. This building was built by Chi Li's father. The location was a little remote, not in the second ring road, but on the side of the third ring road. When building this building, the Chi group spent a lot of money to approve the land and construction. This was also the building of the Chi group at its peak. This building was worth 10 billion yuan, of course, in RMB. Although this building wasn't very tall, it was really a feeling to see such a building here. After getting out of the car, Jiang Hai looked at the huge building in front of him and clicked his tongue. Thinking about himself in the past, it seemed that he really didn't match Chi Li very well. But now, Jiang Hai could afford such a building. After sorting out his backpack, Jiang Hai walked towards the Qi group building in front of him and came to the front desk. At this time, no one knew who Jiang Hai was, so basically everyone turned a blind eye to Jiang Hai. "Hello, how can I help you?" Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, a beautiful girl at the front desk here asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also came over. "Sorry to trouble you. I'm looking for Qi Li." Looking at the girl, Jiang Hai said to her with a smile, "Looking for President Qi? Do you have an appointment?" Hearing that Jiang Hai was looking for Qi Li, the receptionist here was stunned for a moment, then asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. With her memory, she didn't seem to have seen Jiang Hai before. "No, I'll have to trouble you to make a phone call. My name is Jiang Hai." Hearing the receptionist's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to her. Maybe because Jiang Hai's attitude was good, the receptionist didn't avoid Jiang Hai and directly called Qi Li's office with an internal phone. Since Zheng Jin left, Qi Li's assistants became two. One is Du Ning, and the other is a promoted person, but whether it is Du Ning or this person, they all know Jiang Hai. After learning that Jiang Hai came, Du Ning immediately told the news to Qi Li. "Jiang Hai is here?" A few days ago, Jiang Hai said that he would come to see her, but he didn't say the specific time. Now that he suddenly appeared in the building, even Qi Li was stunned. Then a smile quickly flashed on her face. She stopped reading the documents and jumped out of the office. She took her exclusive elevator and went directly to the first floor. After getting off the elevator, she saw Jiang Hai standing not far from the front desk playing with his mobile phone. She couldn't help but speed up her pace. Before Jiang Hai could react, a pair of small hands covered Jiang Hai's eyes. "Guess who I am?" Looking at Jiang Hai, who was stunned for a moment, Qi Li deliberately changed her voice and asked Jiang Hai, who else can it be?" "Qi Li." Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was also stunned for a moment. If he was a veteran in love now, he would definitely tease Qi Li, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai really didn't feel anything about this, so he just said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's unromantic words, Qi Li still didn't care and let go of her hand with a smile. Then with a smile on her face, she hugged Jiang Hai happily, and Jiang Hai turned around and touched her hair. Seeing the scene in front of them, to be honest, the glasses of the whole company almost fell off. Qi Li had always been known as the cold-faced queen in the company. She had the capital to be arrogant, young, beautiful, and powerful. If she wasn't arrogant, who would be arrogant? But such a queen-like woman was quite popular with modern men. Although they heard that Qi Li was married, few people in the company had seen Jiang Hai. So many of them secretly fantasized about Qi Li. But now, Jiang Hai and Qi Li's actions had completely oppressed these people. Regardless of whether they were men or women, they were all stunned at this time. The men came because their dreams were broken, and the women were simply surprised because they had never seen such a smiling Qi Li. At the same time, they also became interested in this man who could make Qi Li put down her pride. At this time, Qi Li only had eyes for Jiang Hai. She didn't care about showing affection to Jiang Hai in front of others. "Why didn't you tell me you were back? I could have picked you up. Let's go upstairs and rest first." Qi Li naturally held Jiang Hai's arm and walked with Jiang Hai to the elevator in the distance. When she walked, she almost put all her weight on Jiang Hai. In other people's words, she seemed to be glued to Jiang Hai. The queen they liked in the past showed another side of herself at this time, an even more charming side, but unfortunately, it was not for them. "I want to give you a surprise." Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then followed her into the elevator. As the elevator door closed, the people outside were still speechless for a long time. It was because today's scene had shocked them too much. But in the company, many WeChat groups and QQ groups exploded not long after. For the Qi family, this was a big event. However, while everyone was concerned about the gossip and the real identity of Jiang Hai, some people who already knew who Jiang Hai was frowned because for them, Jiang Hai's high-profile visit to the Qi family this time was still unknown whether it was a blessing or a curse. Chapter 843. Is it delicious? Looking at Jiang Hai, who was eating happily in front of her, Qi Li sat opposite him and said with a smile, "Well, not bad. Don't you want to eat?" Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. At the same time, he picked up the rolling donkey in front of him and continued to tear it. To be honest, he likes these soft and sticky foods very much. "I want you to feed me." Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li still said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then handed the rolling donkey in front of him with his hand and said to her, "Well, I want you to feed me with your mouth." Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Qi Li pouted and shook her head, then blinked a pair of big eyes and said to Jiang Hai very cutely. Hearing her request, Jiang Hai glanced to the side. After finding that there was indeed no one, he sent the rolling donkey over. Qi Li also opened her mouth and held the rolling donkey, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she kissed Jiang Hai's mouth directly. Her tongue instantly took the initiative to attack Jiang Hai. Feeling the strength of her attack, Jiang Hai didn't mean to let her go. He stretched his arm and directly pulled her from the seat in front of him and let her sit on his lap. Then the two's lips met and kissed passionately. It wasn't until nearly 5 minutes later that Qi Li took the initiative to leave because she was a little out of breath. While chewing the rolling donkey in her mouth, she looked at Jiang Hai with a smile, and at the same time, her hand was constantly exploring Jiang Hai's lower part. It can be seen that she has been holding it in these days. After confirming that there was no one else in this office and outsiders couldn't see, Jiang Hai's hand was not so honest. To be honest, Qi Li in front of him is still very tempting. After Jiang Hai and Qi Li went upstairs just now, Qi Li originally asked Jiang Hai to wait for a while. After she finished her business, she would take Jiang Hai home. But maybe it was because she took too long, and Jiang Hai happened to find a box of rolling donkey, so he sat here and ate it. Then after Qi Li finished her business, she came to flirt with Jiang Hai. Just as the atmosphere between the two gradually heated up, suddenly a knock on the door sounded from outside. After hearing the knock on the door, Jiang Hai and Qi Li's bodies shook, and then they couldn't help but look at each other. "We will go home later." Patting Jiang Hai's chest, Qi Li whispered, then stood up, tidied up her clothes, and asked the person outside, "What's the matter?" Hearing that Qi Li returned to the state of an iceberg, Jiang Hai also sat on the sofa again and ate the rolling donkey in front of him. Hearing Qi Li's words, the person outside the door also replied, "President Qi, the elder and the third elder are here." Listening to Qi Li's words, Du Ning's voice also came from outside the door. Hearing Du Ning's voice, Jiang Hai and Qi Li were stunned. "What are they doing here?" Hearing Du Ning's words, Qi Li thought for a moment, then said to Du Ning outside the door, "Let them come in." Then she gave Jiang Hai a look, telling Jiang Hai to watch out for a while. Then she walked back to her seat and pretended to check documents. Not long after she sat down, the door of the office opened, and 5 people came in from outside. Jiang Hai knew these 5 people. The leader was Qi Li, who was known as Qi Song's elder, but in fact, he wasn't her biological elder. He could only be regarded as the elder of the family. Behind him was Qi Yuanlong, Qi Li's third uncle, who was also a lazy guy. Behind the two of them were their sons, Qi Liangkai and Qi Zhengtao. At the end of the line was Qi Zhengtao's wife, who could be considered the only one in Qi Yuanlong's family who was more business-minded. Her name was Lu Si. Jiang Hai had seen these people before during the Chinese New Year. At that time, Qi Song's family had leaned towards the family. He didn't know what these guys were doing here. Thinking of this, his hand, which was originally holding the food, relaxed. He just sat on the sofa and looked at these people in front of him. When these people came in, they also saw Jiang Hai and Qi Li at a glance. The older you get, the more unruly you become. Seeing that they had come in, Qi Li and Jiang Hai didn't even move. Qi Song's face was a little ugly. He usually liked to take advantage of his seniority and didn't do anything, but he still wanted others to respect him. "Xiao Li, your uncle is here. Why aren't you greeting him?" Hearing Qi Song's unhappy words, Qi Yuanlong chuckled. Hearing what he said, Qi Li's face showed a trace of disdain and a sneer. "Uncle, third uncle, you don't come without a reason. If you have something to say, just say it. Your niece is still very busy here. Chi Li looked at the two people in front of her with a hand supporting her chin. She didn't speak and said calmly, "You? Okay, then let's talk about business. I came this time to see Jiang Hai. After all, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Secondly, I just want to ask you why Liang Kai's proposal was stopped." Seeing that Chi Li in front of him didn't want to talk to him, Chi Song almost went berserk. He remembered his purpose, suppressed the thoughts in his heart, and then said to Chi Li. Hearing what he said, Chi Li couldn't help but chuckle. "Thank you for your concern, uncle." Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and nodded. He naturally knew about the Chi family's affairs. If Chi Li's father was still here, then they would pay attention to some etiquette. Now that Chi Li's father was not here, Jiang Hai didn't have the intention to talk about these things. He just sat there and nodded. "Now that you have seen Jiang Hai, I will answer your second question. Why do we stop Brother Liang Kai's proposal? It is because we don't have the ability to implement it at all." Looking at Chi Song in front of her, Chi Li said to him very seriously, "Why can't it be implemented? Why can't it be implemented? I have already talked to the customs. It is completely possible to bring in live animals. Why can't it be implemented?" Looking at Chi Li in front of him, Chi Liang Kai also stood out from the crowd and said with a face full of anger. In his view, Chi Li was completely against him. "Why can't it be implemented? Why can't it be implemented? Because you can't get that cow." Looking at Chi Liang Sai's appearance, Chi Li chuckled and then glanced at Jiang Hai. When Jiang Hai heard them talking about live animals and cows, his sixth sense told him that it might be related to him. "Why can't you get it? You can get it. This is our Chi family's business, not our family's business. You also have to do something." Seeing that Chi Li in front of him directly rejected his proposal, Chi Liang Kai couldn't help but glare at Chi Li and say, "Sorry, this is not the place for you to shout. Besides, I don't quite understand what you're talking about." Hearing Chi Liang Kai shouting at Chi Li, Jiang Hai frowned and then stood up. He slowly walked behind Chi Li and said to the people in front of him. He was a person who cared about his reputation the most. When he and Chi Li didn't have a good relationship before, he wouldn't allow anyone to shout at his nominal woman in front of him. Now that their relationship had made some progress, it was even more impossible for him to do so. Feeling Jiang Hai's action, Chi Li couldn't help but smile. Her hand unconsciously held Jiang Hai's hand. "What does this have to do with you? Why are you interrupting?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but say. He had to admit that this guy was here to be cannon fodder. Didn't he see that the others didn't say anything? However, although these people didn't want to be cannon fodder, it wasn't bad to let him say this sentence. According to Qi Song and the others, Qi Jingtao's role was just this, nothing more. This matter really has something to do with him, because the cow you are staring at is his. Patting the back of Jiang Hai's hand, Chi Li smiled and said to the people in front of her. Hearing Chi Li's words, the people in front of her couldn't help but be stunned. Qi Jingtao's face was full of embarrassment. Qi Liangsai's eyes kept rolling. Qi Song's face was a little gloomy, and Qi Yuanlong was a little speechless. LVC, who was following behind, still had her head lowered, not letting others see the expression on her face. "Oh, are you talking about my cow?" Hearing Qi Li's words and looking at the expressions of the people in front of him, Jiang Hai was also stunned. After talking for so long, they were talking about his cow, but what was there to talk about? Brother Liang Kai and Brother Jingtao saw that our restaurant beef was selling well, so they wanted to get involved. But the restaurant shares are 100% owned by the two of us, and we're not going to go public, nor are we going to raise capital, so I didn't want them to get involved. So they proposed that the beef in our restaurant could be provided by them, but they couldn't meet the quality of the beef in our restaurant, so they wanted to import your cow and raise it in China. I heard that it has already been arranged. What do you think? Seeing that Jiang Hai understood, Qi Li couldn't help but smile, and then she said to Jiang Hai. Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Originally, he was still puzzled. Didn't Qi Li say that she would go to the United States to look for him after she came back to deal with some things? Why did she come back for so long and have no intention of going back? At first, he thought that she was held back by something, but now it seemed that it was this matter. Since these cows are brother-in-laws, then everything is easy. Brother-in-law, I've already arranged for the customs. Your cows can be directly transported into the customs alive. We are all relatives. You eat the meat, and we also have to drink the soup, right? I think brother-in-law shouldn't refuse. Since they had found a supplier, Qi Liangkai and the others looked at Jiang Hai. Among them, Qi Liangkai also looked at Jiang Hai seriously and said to him, his words really didn't treat himself as an outsider. He, 3 words. Hearing Qi Liangkai's words in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled and raised 3 fingers. No problem? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Liangkai's face flashed with a look of excitement. It can't be done. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai's answer instantly suppressed this excitement. Chapter 844. Bastard, you tricked me. Hearing Zhang's words, Qi Liangkai reacted and roared angrily. Oh, not bad. Your IQ has increased. You even know that I'm tricking you. Looking at Qi Liangkai in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Liangkai's eyes were about to burst into flames. If Jiang Hai wasn't teasing him, but Qi Zhangtao, that guy would have already rushed over and let Jiang Hai beat him up. At present, there weren't many people who could beat Jiang Hai, but Qi Liangkai was used to being gloomy, so he wasn't so impulsive. Jiang Hai, what do you mean? Stopping his son, Qi Song said angrily to Jiang Hai. What do I mean? The literal meaning. With a shrug, Jiang Hai said calmly, did we father and son offend you? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Song said with a puzzled face. He did not remember this. You're really forgetful. Who was the one who relied on the family and then went to my mother-in-law's house to abuse their power? Looking at the 2 people in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. So in their eyes, that was not considered offending? Indeed, the dirtiest things in the world were politics and business. There is a saying in the business circle that there were no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. Since ancient times, Huaxia had emphasized scholars, farmers, and businessmen. Why did they rank the businessmen, who were highly respected by foreigners, so low? It was because most businessmen had no bottom line. In order to make money, they would do anything. The day before yesterday, they were irreconcilable enemies. Today, they could be good friends who drank and chatted happily. The day after tomorrow, they could kill the whole family because of a small matter. This was the businessman. Businessmen valued profits and despised righteousness. This was the exact opposite of Huaxia's policy since ancient times. Just like Qi Song's current state, he didn't think that what he did back then was wrong. He even asked Jiang Hai how there was a gap between them. Didn't he know that there was a huge gap between them? Speaking of which, the only person in this room who was not a businessman was Jiang Hai. In the past, Qi Li had always been a pure businesswoman. But now that she was focused on Jiang Hai, she was a little better. We did that for the sake of the Qi clan. I don't think we made the wrong choice back then. It's easier to make enemies than enemies. It's better to have one more friend than one more enemy. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Song thought for a moment, but the arrogance on his face was still very calm. That selfless face made Jiang Hai really want to go up and give him a kick. He just didn't know if this old guy could withstand Jiang Hai's kick, so Jiang Hai suppressed this idea. That depends on whether this person is worth making friends with. Your businessman's face has nothing to do with me. In my opinion, since you're an enemy, then you should be prepared to fight to the death. Since you decided to be a traitor and seek refuge with the clan, whether you die or not now has nothing to do with me. Even if you talk nonsense, my attitude will still be the same. Hearing Qi Song's words, Jiang Hai said quite disdainfully. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, for the 5 people's faces changed dramatically. Now, Jiang Hai's words were very clear. He was now enemies with these people. He had already given them face by not beating them directly. How could they still want his cow? Ha, daydreaming. You bastard, what are you talking about? Do you think you're awesome just because you raised 2 broken cows? Today, I'll let you see what your grandpa cheese means is. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the others could bear it, but Qi Zhengtao couldn't. As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, He directly walked out of the crowd. With a glare and a frown, he was ready to discuss with Jiang Hai. Of course, he was going to discuss with his fists. Jiang Hai was also looking at him with a smile. As long as he dared to show off, Jiang Hai would teach him a good lesson and let him know that he couldn't afford to provoke just anyone. As for the two old men, Jiang Hai couldn't make a move, because if he didn't control his strength, it would be troublesome if he killed them. But this Qi Zhengtao, haha, Jiang Hai wouldn't be soft-hearted so easily. Qi Li, do you have the same intention? However, at this time, Qi Song stretched out his hand and stopped Qi Yuantao. Then, he stared at Qi Li and said slowly, "Before this, their purpose was indeed to bring in Qi Li's restaurant's cows. Then they would raise them themselves. In their eyes, the profits from the beef were really small. Unfortunately, they had looked for Qi Li many times, but Qi Li didn't give them a direct answer. They also encouraged the other shareholders in the company many times. They pressured Qi Li to merge the 4 restaurants into the Qi family. However, Qi Li had been holding back and didn't agree. She also didn't confront these people directly. This time, when Jiang Hai came back, they originally thought that it was Qi Li who asked Jiang Hai to come back to help her. But they didn't expect this guy to be the owner of those cows. No wonder Qi Li didn't allow anyone to touch those 4 restaurants. It turned out that they were the husband and wife's businesses. This adulterous couple. In the eyes of these people, if they didn't bring them in to make money, it was almost as if they wanted to kill them. Kinship didn't exist here, and Jiang Hai also saw through this point, so he refused very straightforwardly. At the same time, don't forget that Jiang Hai's cows were protected by the American government. At the same time, they were also protected by Jiang Hai. It was impossible to keep them alive because there was no option at all. Jiang Hai is my husband. Since I'm married to him, I naturally have to follow his lead. Whatever he says, it's what it is. Hearing Qi Song's words, Qi Li also chuckled, and then said slowly. Hearing Qi Li's words, Qi Song and the others' faces were really dark to a certain extent. Since they knew that it was useless to say anything here, Qi Song also waved his hand, turned around, and walked out of the office. After they left, Jiang Hai's brows also frowned slightly. Dad, are we just going to let this matter go? I have already told young Master Zhang. This matter is in the bag. He has also helped to settle the customs. But now Jiang Hai suddenly intervened. Our plans are all messed up. After walking out of the office, Qi Liang hesitated and said to Qi Song. They wanted Jiang Hai's cows, but it wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. This matter isn't over so easily. We have to find a way to make them talk. Let's go. Narrowing his eyes, Qi Song snorted coldly, and then slowly walked forward. The others had to endure now, but Qi Yuantao didn't think so. Dad, Uncle, you guys go down first. I'm going to the bathroom. When they reached the floor of their office, Qi Zhengtao, who was walking together, suddenly said at this time, then turned around and ran to the other side. Little C, watch this guy. Don't make trouble for my people. Seeing his actions, the other 3 men couldn't help but frown. Then Qi Yuanlong thought for a moment and said to Qi Zhengtao's wife, Lucy. Lucy's father was a general manager of a subsidiary company of the Qi Group. He had a good talent in business, and his daughter, Lucy, was also quiet and had a high education. After entering the Qi Group, she also showed some talent. Just when everyone felt that like father, like daughter, she actually married Qi Zhengtao. Many people lamented that it was really a flower inserted in cow dung. However, after only a year of marriage, this voice disappeared because, unknowingly, Lucy had become the spokesperson of Qi Yuanlong's family in the company. Qi Yuanlong and Qi Zhengtao didn't have any business talent. Qi Yuanlong just hung the name of a director, and Qi Zhengtao hung the name of a deputy minister, but it was useless. They didn't have any real power. The only people they could control were their secretaries and drivers, but these 2 people were still paid by the group. It could be said that they didn't care at all. On the other hand, Lucy became a department head of the group. Although she wasn't a manager, she had real power in her hands. Her influence might be greater than her father's. Yes, I will keep an eye on him. Hearing the words of the old man, Lucy also nodded and said respectfully. But they didn't know that while they were talking, Qi Zhengtao had already taken the elevator to the security department. No matter which company's security department it was, there would always be some people who mingled in the underworld. They didn't expect them to patrol, nor did they expect them to be in charge, but they were paid much more than ordinary security guards. The purpose was to let them deter some of the punks in the underworld so that these guys wouldn't dare to come and scam. After all, although they were related to the Qi group, it was impossible to be moved by every little thing. Naturally, the Qi group also raised a few such people. Qi Zhengtao relied on the reputation of his company's direct descendant. Although he didn't mix well with the regular employees, he had some reputation among these people. When he walked into the security lounge, he saw 4 or 5 people in the distance. They were wearing security uniforms, sitting there, smoking and playing cards. The company clearly stated that smoking was not allowed, but for these people, this rule was not established. When these people saw Qi Zhengtao coming, they immediately stood up with a smile. "Oh, Master Qi, you are here. Do you want to play?" Looking at Qi Zhengtao, the security guard here said with a smile, "You are not at the level." Qi Zhengtao said disdainfully as he looked at these people throwing dozens and hundreds of cards on the bench. Yes. How can our level be enough for you to play? We're just killing time." Hearing what Qi Zhengtao said, these people didn't care. Instead, they laughed and said, "Don't talk nonsense. My wife will come to me in a while. Today, I'm looking for you because I have something to trouble you with." Hearing their compliments, Qi Zhengtao also waved his hand, then looked at these people in front of him and said seriously, Chapter 845. I was wondering why there was no news from you after you came back to the capital. It seems that you are in trouble. After these people left, Jiang Hai patted Qi Li's head in front of him and said indifferently under her reproachful gaze, "Oh, yeah, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to distract you, but now it seems that it's better to tell you earlier." Qi Li shrugged her shoulders and said in a somewhat speechless manner, "Indeed, this was a matter that gave her a headache. What the hell is going on? Tell me." Pulling Qi Li up directly, Jiang Hai sat on her boss chair, then put her on his lap and asked Qi Li. With Qi Li's level, she should come. The main thing is like this. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also organized her words and said slowly, "The main problem was still Jiang Hai and Qi Li's restaurant. At the beginning, Qi Li went to the United States to find Jiang Hai to talk about their relationship, but she happened to meet Prawalton. At that time, Qi Li knew that Jiang Hai was no longer her burden. She couldn't be blamed for being realistic. In fact, the relationship between a man and a woman at home was proportional to their economic status. Since ancient times, Huaxia had always been a patriarchal society. Of course, in many areas, the husband's authority was not respected. But if a woman was asked to find a man who was much worse than her, she might not be willing at first. Even if they were together, this woman would definitely be the head of the family. In terms of age, one was as beautiful as a flower, the other was ordinary, one was rich, and the other was poor. If Qi Li were to choose, she would never like Jiang Hai. This was inevitable. This was also one of the reasons why she hadn't paid much attention to Jiang Hai in the past year of their marriage. This wasn't to clear her name, but to illustrate the reality. Even in an average family, if the man earned 2,000 yuan a month and the woman earned 30,000 yuan a month, then in this family, the woman's words would have a final say because the man had to rely on the woman to survive. This was reality. On the other hand, Jiang Hai wasn't willing to give up his dignity. Secondly, he wasn't willing to try to change. He wasn't an ambitious person. Therefore, it was no wonder that Qi Li looked down on him. This was indeed a very sad thing. However, after Qi Li went to the United States, she suddenly found that Jiang Hai was not as free as she thought. There was an old saying that gold would always be spent. Oh, it would shine. Jiang Hai's actions in the United States were shining in her eyes. In the past, it wasn't that Jiang Hai didn't have any ability, it was just that his nature was like this. He liked the idea of playing with the world, because facts speak louder than words. Jiang Hai's ability was displayed in the United States. But if Jiang Hai knew that she had such thoughts, Jiang Hai would probably laugh. But no matter what, Qi Li changed a little after that day, especially when Jiang Hai saved her from the mouth of the mountain lion. From that day onwards, she wanted to know more about Jiang Hai. She had to admit that sometimes people were cheap. In the past, when Jiang Hai was guarding her all day, she did not even look at Jiang Hai. Now that she was interested in Jiang Hai, she began to inquire about Jiang Hai's news, wanting to know his movements. In addition to the later contact, she was sure that she seemed to have unknowingly fallen in love with Jiang Hai. But this love came too late. Jiang Hai was already surrounded by a large number of women. It had to be said that people never know how their lives will be. No matter how you plan, there will always be a time when you go astray. If it was 5 years ago, if someone told Qi Li that she would marry an average-looking, greedy, lustful man who was surrounded by more than a dozen women, she would probably take her limited edition Emax bag and smash it directly on the person's face. But 5 years later, this was the reality. It was as simple as that, so simple that she was a little caught off guard. Well, the topic went astray. This time, the crisis mainly came from Jiang Hai's beef. In order to have more contact with Jiang Hai, Qi Li opened 4 steak restaurants in the capital. She introduced Jiang Hai's beef and then began to sell it. There was no other business secret, no advertising, and no promotion, because this was prepared for the top people in the capital. The sales cost really had nothing to do with the wage earners. If they could not afford the sales cost, then don't come. It was a very simple reason. As the restaurants became popular, more things happened. Huaxia people were the second smartest people in the world, especially when it came to doing business. They might not be as good as the Jews who were born to do business, but they were very sensitive to business. After seeing that these 4 restaurants were making money, many people were tempted to invest in them. Some people wanted to come over and take a share, but they were stopped by Qi Li. What a joke! The Qi family was not the top super family in the capital, but it was at the bottom of the first class and the top of the second class. The company had been worth close to 20 billion, but with the addition of the 4 restaurants, it was worth more than 60 billion, which was $10 billion in total. Although it was still far from being comparable to the mega corporations, it was still a terrifying amount. No one could easily touch such a behemoth or cut off a piece of meat from it. In particular, the Qi family seemed to have some connections in the Middle East, which made the people in the top management even more afraid to act rashly. Since the people in the top management did not dare to make a move, the people in the bottom management naturally did not dare to make a move. Since they could not get the restaurants, they began to think about the raw materials. Many people who had some connections came to Qi Li. They hoped that they could obtain the right to supply the beef. However, when Qi Li just put the beef there, these people left. It was not because of any reason, but because they couldn't compete with her. However, it was precisely because of this that more people paid attention to the beef here. But this time, they were not concerned about the supply rights or the shares of the restaurants, but about the cattle. It was impossible to do it openly. So Qi Li and the others who coveted the restaurants surrendered without integrity this time and became the vanguard of these people. They came over because they wanted Qi Li to bring in some live cattle and breed them. In a small way, these cattle would be money in the future. In a big way, it was called improving the domestic cattle breed, which was beneficial to the country and the people. However, in the face of such a big accusation, Jiang Hai only wanted to raise a middle finger and tell them that it was none of their business. Hee, these people in the country are really interesting. Touching his nose, Jiang Hai laughed. It seemed that his choice to go to the United States was very wise. Otherwise, in the country, his manor, farm, and so on would have been occupied by some so-called government officials. A department-level cadre was probably enough to ruin his family. If they got the cattle but didn't study it, they would occupy his pasture. If the pasture was not studied, they would probably study him. At that time, not only would his family be ruined, but he would also die. This was inevitable. Of course, this couldn't be said that Jiang Hai was too pessimistic. No matter what, he had to prepare for the worst, right? Compared to the country, the United States was not much better. If Jiang Hai went to the United States at the beginning and showed a strong side, he would probably be eliminated by those people in the United States in an instant. But now it was already the 3rd year. It was not an exaggeration to describe his power in the United States as intertwined. The biggest difference between the United States and Huaxia was that the world was based on the gold standard. As a taxpayer, Jiang Hai would become the most powerful person in the privileged class in the United States as long as he did not go against the United States government in terms of principles. But in the country, as long as he did not become an official, he would never become a person of the privileged class. He was really too lazy to deal with the deceit of the officialdom. One wrong step there, and he would be doomed eternally. Are you sure about who is behind those people? Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also understood that Qi Song and the others were actually just some subordinates. The people who really wanted to touch his piece of meat should be the people at the top. A second-tier big shot's grandson, but I haven't determined who it is. The other party is very secretive, but don't worry. What you have to do now is to expand your influence in the United States as much as possible. As long as your influence is greater, then these people won't dare to do anything to me. And even if they do, I can still go to the United States to find you. What if we emigrate? Qi Li shrugged. She didn't care too much about this. To be honest, she was very interested in the brand of the Qi Group. She couldn't just watch this company collapse, so she had been keeping an eye on it. However, if it really came to the point where she had to become an enemy of Huaxia, then she would not hesitate to give up here. Just as Qi Li said, Jiang Hai's place was her escape route. Similarly, her place was also Jiang Hai's escape route. It's really troublesome. Like I said, what I hate the most is these twists and turns. Are you done dealing with things? Let's go home. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said, as if he had given up. He really hated these things. He was not the kind of person who took pleasure in guessing other people's thoughts. He did not like to take risks. He preferred to crush. It was as simple as that. Okay, you go downstairs and wait for me. I'm going to ask the heads of those departments to come up and take these documents away. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's little face couldn't help but blush. Go home. What do you want to do when you go home? That doesn't need to be said. However, she wouldn't object to this. She gave Jiang Hai's chest a punch and said in a low voice. Chapter 846. After leaving Qi Li's office, Jiang Hai also greeted Du Ning. Du Ning was Azalina's colleague, whom Jiang Hai rescued from Ukraine. To be honest, Jiang Hai really felt that these girls were very useful. Reconnaissance, spying, force, protection, and so on were all quite good. And because they had to do undercover missions before, they all had a good memory and could find their positions in an instant. According to the saying in the acting circle, they were like whatever role they played. When they were undercover to kill people, even if there was a slight mistake, they would die because of it. People who had grown to their level were already able to adapt to all roles. Although Du Ning had never been a secretary or assistant before, after half a month of internship here, she had basically mastered it. Now she was already Qi Li's helper. Although she still couldn't provide her own opinions to Qi Li like Zheng Jin in the past, she didn't expect her to do this, right? Now she lived with Qi Li, and some friendship between the two women had unknowingly developed. This was what Jiang Hai wanted to see the most. After telling Du Ning to leave the door open at night, Jiang Hai went to the first floor under Du Ning's blushing face, and then walked directly to the door on the first floor. Although the outside of the imperial capital was now full of smoke, he still liked to stay outside, more than staying at home. But there was a saying that it was easy to come in, but difficult to go out. When he came in, no one came to trouble Jiang Hai, but when he went out, several security guards suddenly stopped Jiang Hai. Looking at their appearance, Jiang Hai frowned, but thinking that these people were also Qi Li's employees, Jiang Hai suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and looked at them. What's the matter? Looking at these people in front of him, Jiang Hai said to them. Although these people in front of him were wearing security uniforms, he knew at a glance that they were not good people. What's the matter? Don't you know what it is? Take it out. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the security guards here looked at Jiang Hai and looked up and down. His figure was quite tall and not small, but they had seen many people like him before. So these people had no fear at all. Instead, they came forward and said to Jiang Hai, "Things? What things? Hearing what they said, Jiang Hai frowned. What are these guys talking about? Why can't I understand? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the security guard couldn't help but smile. He wanted Jiang Hai to ask this question. What things? You still have the nerve to ask me. Take out the things you stole immediately. Hearing the security guard raise his voice by 2 octaves, the people who were nearby were stunned and then looked at Jiang Hai. Many of these people knew Jiang Hai. After all, Qi Li's attitude towards Jiang Hai just now was not a secret in the company. Although they didn't know the relationship between Jiang Hai and Qi Li, they could see that the relationship between the two was very close. For their goddess in their hearts, being taken advantage of by this guy, many people's hearts were broken. Now seeing that he was stopped here, these people couldn't help but laugh. For such a thing, they were quite happy to see it. People have this kind of revenge mentality. Their goddess and Jiang Hai were so close. Now that it was proven that Jiang Hai was a thief and was going to be punished by the security guards, they were naturally happy to see it. So many people stopped and watched the fun. What? You said that I stole things? Looking at these people, Jiang Hai laughed self-deprecatingly. I stole things? This is a very good accusation. Jiang Hai was amused by the accusation. The money of this great Xia building can't be compared to Jiang Hai's net worth. If he stole things, what did he steal? Hearing this, Jiang Hai understood that these people were looking for trouble, so he crossed his arms and looked at them with amusement. You said that I stole things? Well, okay, what did you steal? Take out the evidence, or call the police. I will help you. Looking at the security guards in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile, and then took out his mobile phone. Kid, you are very arrogant. Seeing that Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone, the gangsters here were stunned for a moment. Then, they seemed to remember something and didn't care. They looked at Jiang Hai with amusement. Under the gaze of the leader, they surrounded him. Seeing the actions of these people, Jiang Hai didn't care. He still stood in place calmly and looked at them. It seems that if I don't let you suffer, you won't know how many eyes Ma Wanya has. Go and teach him how to talk to us in this city. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't escape and was still looking at them so calmly, these gangsters were angry. After the leader gave the order, the people around him rushed over immediately. But unfortunately, just as they raised their fists, Jiang Hai had already made a move. He kicked the person who was the fastest in front of him. The huge force kicked the guy directly from the ground. After flying for about 5 or 6 meters in the air, he fell heavily on the ground. Because the ground here was made of marble, this guy directly slid out and almost slid to the door before stopping. Seeing Jiang Hai's kick create such a shocking effect, the security guards and the people who were watching the fun were also a little confused. This was not what was written in the script. Jiang Hai didn't play according to the script. However, while they were stunned, Jiang Hai wasn't. He came up and kicked a few more times, directly kicking these people in front of him in an instant. These security guards were not real gangsters in the sense. Those green-skinned ruffians and the like might just look fierce, but in fact, they weren't very strong physically. Although these gangsters used to be gangsters, after all, they changed after they had some reputation. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here as security guards. Their biggest role was to shock those gangsters. Sometimes, reputation might not be useful for gangsters. Compared to reputation, combat strength was also a measure. Therefore, these gangsters were still in good physical condition. Although they smoked and drank, they were not small in size. But compared with Jiang Hai, it was useless no matter how strong they were. His physical fitness was 8 times the limit of an ordinary human. How could these guys compare with him? He went up and gave him a series of kicks, sending all of them flying. Of course, he didn't kill them. He didn't say that he would kick these guys to death, but this kick would definitely make them feel pain. What are you still watching there for? Come and help. After most of the security guards flew out, they just covered their mouths and screamed. The leader's physical fitness might be better, so while covering his mouth, he also shouted at the security guards standing outside the door and the people around him who were watching the fun. Hearing his words, these people looked at each other. Some of them had a little hesitation in their eyes, but most of them took a step back. Jiang Hai didn't make trouble here. They came here to work, not to fight. If they hurt someone, or if Jiang Hai hurt them, then the loss outweighed the gain. These white-collar workers weren't gangsters. They didn't have the courage to go up. In their view, their job was very important. After all, if there was any accident and their job was lost, who could they find a reason with? The ordinary security guards outside were actually some good people. If they had that kind of ruthlessness, why didn't they go out to gangsters at such a young age? So for a while, under the roar of the leader, no one stood up. What's wrong? What happened here? But at this moment, Qi Zhengtao's voice came from a distance. Then he was seen holding a glass of water and slowly walking over. He had been paying attention to the situation here for a long time. After all, these people were hired by him to beat up Jiang Hai. Hearing that there was no sound here, he was also afraid that there would be an accident. In his impression, Jiang Hai was still the young man with a face mask when he attended the wedding. It was best to let these gangsters teach Jiang Hai a lesson, but if they beat up Jiang Hai, then it would be troublesome. Jiang Hai was Qi Li's husband. Although he thought that he was invincible and the best in the world, to be honest, he was still a little afraid of Qi Li. If Qi Li fought to the death with them for Jiang Hai, then he would have to use some means. Well, who knew where his confidence came from? If Qi Li used the same method to deal with Qi Liangkai to deal with Qi Zhengtao, then he would probably be squatting in some prison, crying tears behind bars. This idiot had a lot of dirt on him, but Qi Li was too lazy to pay attention to him. However, when he came over and looked at the situation on the field, he was a little confused. In his opinion, Jiang Hai should be lying on the ground with a bloody nose and a swollen face. But at this time, he was standing in the same place with a calm face, while the people he found were lying on the ground moaning. Young Master Qi, this guy stole something. We wanted to search him, but he didn't cooperate and even injured our people. Looking at Qi Zhengtao, who was in a daze, the leader reacted quickly and shouted at the top of his voice. Hearing his words, Qi Zhengtao's brain quickly turned. Although he was quite stupid, he still had a mysterious self-confidence. But he had been in the business world for many years, and he had seen some methods that he had not learned before, such as slandering. Jiang Hai, what do you mean by this? Don't think that you could do whatever you want in the Qi group, just because you have Qi Li's support. Chapter 847. Does this count as doing whatever I want? You haven't seen what I do even more. This is the lobby. I can be sure that there are surveillance cameras. Whether I do whatever I want or not, you'll know once you check it out. He looked at Qi Zhengtao with disdain. Was there something wrong with this guy's brain? If he didn't jump out now, Jiang Hai wouldn't be here to interrogate these people about who was behind the scenes, and he wouldn't be able to make things difficult for them on the spot. Now, anyone with a functioning brain would understand. If he didn't beat up Jiang Hai, he could just close his eyes. However, this guy didn't want to. He had to jump out. If he wasn't courting death, what was he doing? In the past, Jiang Hai had always thought that those brainless second generations only existed in novels or TV dramas, because in the real world, such people might have died long ago. But now, he found that reality was always more fascinating than novels and TV dramas, because this world really didn't lack idiots. Qi Zhengtao in front of him was definitely a teenager with a mental problem. Bullshit surveillance. If I say it's your fault, then it's your fault. What are you talking about? You guys arrest him. Sure enough, after listening to Jiang Hai's words, this Qi Zhengtao was like a character in some melodramatic TV dramas. He panicked a little in an instant, but he didn't run away. Instead, he stood in place and shouted loudly. It was almost as if he was saying that he was the sky and the law of the Qi group. Hearing his words, the people next to him moved further away. Now, almost all the people in the company knew that the Qi group was divided into two forces. The first one, which was also the most powerful, was Qi Li's faction. The second one was Qi Li's faction, Qi Zhengtao and Qi Yuanlong, who were supposed to be staunch supporters of Qi Li, with a vanguard of Qi Song's faction at this time. Not everyone liked to be a lackey. For high-level struggles like this, most of the people were immortals fighting. They were relatively far away. Although it was good to succeed the emperor, they didn't see those who failed the emperor. Their families would be ruined, and their families would be ruined. These ordinary employees didn't have any intention of getting involved in this kind of fight, So after these people heard Qi Jingtao's words, they just stood there. Some even took a few steps back, but no one came over. You bastards, you don't have to come tomorrow. You're all fired. And you, Jiang Hai, this isn't over. Seeing that these people were not moving, Qi Jingtao was also angry. He pointed at the people around him and shouted loudly. But to be honest, Jiang Hai felt a little pity for Qi Yuanlong. Although he didn't have any talent in business, he was still considered a normal person. How did he give birth to Qi Jingtao, who seemed to have an abnormal mind? Did he really think that the Qi family was under his control? Even a sweeper could tell that he had no real power here. He wanted to fire someone? He did not have the authority to do so. He did not have the ability to do so. Who told you that this is over? Looking at Qi Jingtao in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Then he slowly stepped over the bodies of these security guards and walked to Qi Jingtao with a calm face. When Jiang Hai was in the office just now, he found that Jiang Hai seemed to have grown taller. But at this time, when Jiang Hai stood up, he found that this was not his illusion. Jiang Hai had really grown taller. He was almost a head taller than him. Although Qi Jingtao was not very reliable, his height was still quite good. He was about 1.8 meters tall. Now, that Jiang Hai was a head taller than him, it meant that Jiang Hai's height was infinitely close to 2 meters. In fact, it was almost the same. Jiang Hai was about 1.96 meters tall. With such a height and Jiang Hai's dislike of wearing leather shoes, he seemed to only have 2 formal suits. The total number of times he had worn them could be counted with 2 hands. At other times, he was wearing outdoor clothes and sportswear. Just like now, he was wearing sportswear with a sweater and a hoodie on the outside. His trousers were also very ordinary, loose-legged sweatpants. He was carrying a small backpack on his back. To be honest, no one could tell that he was a rich man. The most valuable Patek Philippe watch on him was also covered by the sleeves of his hoodie. No one could tell that he was a rich man. His most valuable Patek Philippe watch was also covered by the sleeves of his hoodie. No one could tell. At this time, he was also wearing a pair of running shoes. His running shoes were the Air Max series running shoes that were very comfortable to wear. This kind of running shoes was jokingly called the outer height because the air cushion could be seen. When one stepped on it, it was quite soft and comfortable. And the most important thing was that these shoes were about 3 or 4 centimeters high. With these shoes, Jiang Hai was really infinitely close to 2 meters. Now, standing in front of Qi Jingtao, he was very oppressive. What are you doing? What do you want to do? How dare you hit me? Looking at Jiang Hai's size and the miserable appearance of the security guards in the distance, Qi Jingtao was a little confused. However, he was not a person who would admit defeat. At this time, he still straightened his neck and said with a tough face, he had no choice. He had never learned to admit defeat in his life. Since he was a child, his parents had been very indulgent to him. He could have anything he wanted. It was said that the poor raised the son and the rich raised the daughter. But in the Northeast, things were often the opposite, because the older generation would more or less have some thoughts of favoring boys over girls. Qi Jingtao was the only male in the Qi family. Since he was a child, Qi Li's grandfather and grandmother had been very indulgent to him. It was not an exaggeration to say that they would give him anything he wanted. As the old saying went, the youngest son and the eldest grandson were the lifeblood of the old man and the old woman. When the youngest son and the eldest grandson appeared in the same family, it was not as simple as favoritism. Since he was a child, Qi Jingtao would get whatever he wanted. When he hit Qi Li, her grandfather and grandmother would also say that Qi Li was wrong. Who told you to provoke him? Therefore, Qi Li's relationship with her grandfather and grandmother was very bad. Therefore, people like Qi Jingtao and his character were very much related to the fact that he had never been beaten since he was a child. He was invincible since he was a child. When he was in school, Qi Li's father had already succeeded in starting a business. His father could be considered to have been brought up a little. At least, he was not short of money. He was even more spoiled. Since he was in elementary school, he was a bully. Even the teachers did not dare to control him. When he entered society, his father protected him, so no one dared to provoke him. In the Qi family, It was probably the biggest setback he had suffered, but he only became a small official. At the same time, his father had always instilled in him the idea that the Qi family was passed down to the male and not the female. Although Qi Li was powerful now, she was after all a woman, and he was the legitimate son of the family. In the future, he would inherit the company. He was the master of the family. Otherwise, how could he be so arrogant? In his opinion, Jiang Hai was a stinky beggar. As the master of the family, he naturally could hit and scold as he wanted. How could Jiang Hai dare to talk back? However, he was thinking too much. This was not the ancient times. Jiang Hai not only dared to talk back, but also dared to hit him. Seeing his gaze, Jiang Hai could not help but laugh. He directly slapped him. Slap! With a loud sound, Qi Zhengtao was directly slapped to the ground by Jiang Hai. In an instant, his face swelled up. Then, his face was full of anger and disbelief. He glanced at Jiang Hai, who was standing in front of him, and his pupils kept dilating. F***CK your grandmother. I'm going to kill you. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, Qi Zhengtao roared. He stood up and wanted to wave his fist at Jiang Hai, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai grabbed his hand in an instant. Then, Jiang Hai grabbed his collar with his right hand and pulled him up from the ground. Seeing Jiang Hai lift a person so easily, many people around him gasped. What are you doing? Let go of him. At this time, in the distance, two people walked down the stairs. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, the person in front couldn't help but shout loudly. Seeing this person appear, many people nearby couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This was because they also knew this person. Qi Yuanlong, one of the founding members of the Qi family, and Qi Zhengtao's father. Unlike Qi Zhengtao, Qi Yuanlong still had some influence in the company. He could even influence the board of directors. Jiang Hai, let go of him. Looking at Jiang Hai pulling his son, Qi Yuanlong roared. Tch. Looking at Qi Yuanlong with disdain, Jiang Hai indeed let go. But at the same time, he also kicked the guy's chest, sending him flying horizontally. The guy flew for about 5 meters before he fell to the ground. After sliding for some distance, he began to lie on the ground and scream miserably. Qi Yuanlong's eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at Jiang Hai. His scream was almost the same as the scream of the pig when Jiang Hai was about to kill it. It was harsh and unpleasant, with a trace of panic. You dare to do this, you bastard. Go, arrest him for me. Seeing that Jiang Hai dared to hit his son in front of him, Qi Yuanlong knew that he had never hit his son before. How could he bear it when Jiang Hai dared to hit his son? He pointed at the people around him and shouted loudly. When Qi Zhengtao ordered this group of people, these people could ignore it. But when Qi Yuanlong said this, these people had some hesitation. This was because Qi Yuanlong could really fire them. But considering Jiang Hai's strength, these people were a little scared. Let's see who dares. Just as these people were in a deadlock, a cold female voice came from a distance. Then, under everyone's gaze, Qi Li came out of the elevator with Du Ning. She looked at the people on the scene with a strong aura and then glanced at the employees of the Qi family. Seeing Qi Li appear, these employees naturally retreated. What a joke! Qi Li's prestige in the Qi family was not comparable to Qi Yuanlong's. Chapter 848. What? Are you rebelling? Hurry up and get to work. Walking to Jiang Hai's side, Qi Li's body shook. She glanced at the people here. In an instant, many people who were watching the show turned away. They couldn't afford to offend Qi Li. You came at the right time. Your husband hit my son. How are you going to settle this? Seeing that Qi Li came over and intimidated the crowd, Qi Yuanlong also knew that his idea of mobilizing the crowd was shattered. However, this matter couldn't be settled like this. Looking at his son who was still retching, his heart was about to break. He pointed at Qi Li and said loudly, "Oh, well done. You don't know how to discipline your son. My husband helped you discipline him. You should thank us." Glancing at Jiang Hai and seeing that he wasn't injured, Qi Li also breathed a sigh of relief. Then, she looked at Qi Zhengtao with some disgust and said very indifferently, This is your brother. The same blood flows in his body as yours. You woman, don't you have any shame? Hearing Qi Li's words, Qi Yuanlong roared with a face full of anger. In his opinion, how could Qi Li be like this? This was her brother, the baby of their family. How could she let an outsider hit him? Well done, but you hit him a little too lightly. But what's the situation here? Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Qi Li just glanced at Qi Zhengtao indifferently, then smiled and asked Jiang Hai. These security guards came to make trouble for me. After I knocked them down, the mastermind behind the scenes jumped out. He begged me to hit him, so I fulfilled his wish. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai shrugged gently and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Yuanlong trembled with anger. He had never seen someone as shameless as Jiang Hai. Of course, Jiang Hai had never seen someone as shameless as Qi Zhengtao and Qi Yuanlong. Don't you feel even the slightest bit of guilt for lying there? It was clearly you who recklessly injured the security guard. My son came over to question you, and then you became angry out of shame and hit my son. Now, not only do you not repent, but you are also inverting right and wrong. Are you still human? Qi Yuanlong roared loudly as he looked at Jiang Hai. Upon hearing his words, many passers-by could not help but lower their heads. Some people were born to be shameless and did not need to be learned. He's really shameless. There are surveillance cameras here. You'll know once you take a look. Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. He suddenly felt pity for Qi's song. Was it really good to have such a pig as a teammate? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Yuanlong waved his hand and said loudly with a righteous look, My son's character is obvious to all. He doesn't need to look at this at all. Even if he did, who knows if you changed it? When Jiang Hai heard his words, he was so shocked that he didn't know what to do. This conversation constantly refreshed his understanding of the lower limits of a person's character. This father and son pair was really top quality to the point of making one's hair stand on end. They are really shameless to the extreme. Let's go. Talking to such people is insulting my IQ. With a shrug, Jiang Hai said to Qi Li with slight embarrassment. He didn't know that Qi Li had been facing such an opponent. Jiang Hai talked to him for 5 minutes and felt that his IQ had been pulled down by 100 points in an instant. If he fought with such people all day long, Jiang Hai found it hard to imagine that he could face the world correctly. Oh, it's good that you know. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li shrugged gently and then naturally took Jiang Hai's arm. At the same time, she looked at the security guards who were still lying on the ground in front of her. You people have been fired. If you have anything to say, go to the police station and say it. Looking at these people, she once again restored her Ice Queen appearance and said very coldly. Hearing Qi Li's words, these people also smiled helplessly. They knew that this time they stood on the wrong side. Jiang Hai turned out to be Qi Li's husband. Even if they broke their brains, they couldn't imagine that Jiang Hai was Qi Li's husband. Now, they really wanted to cry and say that fairy tales were all lies. In their view, Qi Li's husband must be the kind of dragon among men. He had the appearance, height, and knowledge. He was dressed in a suit and leather shoes. He looked like a refined scum. How could he be like Jiang Hai now? He wasn't handsome and wore sportswear. He didn't look like a business elite, nor did he look like a refined scum. Except for his height, he was very ordinary. If he was thrown into a crowd, he wouldn't make a splash. They knew that this time they had kicked an iron plate, so they didn't resist Qi Li's words. If they didn't speak, they could still go to the finance department to get their salary. If they spoke, they probably wouldn't get a fart. And most importantly, they also knew that there were surveillance cameras here. They couldn't count on the police. Like Qi Yuanlong, what his son said was the truth and the law of this world. After all, there were still more normal people. Qi Li, you two murderers. You're a pair of dogs. You don't deserve to be surnamed Qi. Watching Jiang Hai and Qi Li walk out, Qi Yuanlong also shouted loudly. He knew that no one could make a decision for him now. He was also a person who cherished his life. He definitely couldn't risk his life to fight Jiang Hai, so he could only shout there, but it was useless. You have to fight with these mad dogs here every day. It's really hard on you, but why don't you kill them? After leaving the hall, Jiang Hai, and Chi Li went directly to the parking lot in front of the company. The Chi group had a total of 2 parking lots. One was in front of the main entrance, with a total of about 30 parking spaces. The other was the underground parking lot, with a total of 2 floors. The underground parking lot was naturally for the company's people to park. The small parking lot above ground was specially prepared for the people who came to do business, the VIPs, and the company's top executives, such as Chi Li and the others. After getting in Chi Li's Rolls-Royce, Jiang Hai and Chi Li sat in the back, and Du Ning went to the front to drive. Jiang Hai asked in confusion. Because these guys were mentally unstable, it meant that there were many loopholes. It shouldn't be difficult to get rid of them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Li slowly said, "In the beginning, when I just took over the Chi group, it was not good for me to do it to my uncle and eldest brother. Although they were fighting for power, after all, they were protecting the Chi group's reputation. In fact, it was understandable. Whether it was Chi Song or Chi Yuan Long, as long as the Chi group existed, they were shareholders of the Chi group. Not only were they rich, but they also had a certain social influence. When Chi Li's father passed away, there were many outside companies that wanted to come and break up the Chi group. At that time, although there were internal struggles for power, as long as it was for the good of the Chi group, they were still willing to help. At that time, there was no way to separate them, so they could only integrate all the forces. This was inevitable. Later, the Chi group stabilized. When they were stirring up trouble, I gave them a warning, but the backlash from the board of directors was very fierce. They were all old members of the Chi group, and those old people were all afraid. A new emperor brings in new ministers, and the bow is put away when the birds are gone. Therefore, after that warning, they became more active. Even Chi Song's family was very close to the Yin family. Seeing that Jiang Hai understood, Chi Xian continued to talk. For this period of history, Jiang Hai also knew a little about it. However, after the fall of the Yin family, Chi Song's family restrained a lot. Chi Yuanlong's family's real power was also taken away by me. I thought that if they just wanted to retire in the company or take control of some independent departments, I would let them have it. But I didn't expect that not long after, they would stir up trouble again. Sigh, I'm really tired. Rubbing her temples, Chi Li said with some helplessness. The last time she went to Jiang Hai's manor, she was really prepared to find a professional manager after she came back. If there was anything, she could directly have a video conference. As long as she could grasp the general direction, it would be fine. At that time, she would be with Jiang Hai every day and give birth to a fat baby for Jiang Hai as soon as possible. This was actually the most important thing. But just as she was about to do that, she found that during the time she was gone, Chi Song and Chi Yuan Long made another move. After coming back, she had been thinking about how to deal with these guys, but under the pressure from above and the pressure from the board of directors, it was not so easy for her to get rid of these 2 forces. Although she could still suppress them, it would be a problem sooner or later. Then how do I deal with these 2 guys? Touching his chin, Jiang Hai knew the situation of these 2 guys. It was just like a prostitute on the roadside. What threat did it pose to you? In fact, there was no threat. However, these things existed just like that. Even if it didn't bite people, they would still respond to them. However, it was really troublesome to get rid of them. They might even dirty their own hands. Although Chi Li wasn't a clean freak, she didn't want to dirty her own hands. In fact, there is no way. Shaking her head, Chi Li actually wanted to get rid of these 2 people, but there were really not many ways. So it's like this. Hearing Chi Li say that there was no way, Jiang Hai also thought about it, but soon gave up. After all, he was not the kind of business genius, and he was not very good at digging traps for others. He preferred to directly crush people instead of playing with strategies. Although Hua Xia people had some talent in this area, unfortunately, Jiang Hai did not seem to have it. Forget it. Let's not talk about this sad topic. What do you want to eat tonight? Roast duck? Instant boiled mutton? Or do you want to eat stir-fried vegetables? After patting Jiang Hai, Chi Li stopped thinking about this problem and asked Jiang Hai with a smile. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.